Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this beautiful sunny day in February where it's going to get up to 60 degrees. So we're getting spring a little early this year and it feels awful good. I want to welcome everyone to the 2024 Beyond the Basic Stormwater Conference. My name is Brooke McDonald and I'm the President and CEO for the Conservation Foundation. We're very happy that you're able to join us today. We want to thank you, and we also want to thank all of our wonderful speakers today. I'm looking forward to learning how we can build more climate resiliency into our landscape and into our community. So we thank our speakers. We have a wonderful lineup for you today. For those that may not know much about the Conservation Foundation, we are a private, not-for-profit organization, been around for more than 50 years. And we work primarily in DuPage, Kane, Kendall, and Will counties. We do some work in Cook, DeKalb, LaSalle, and Grundy, but mostly DuPage, Kane, Kendall, and Will counties. Our mission focuses on 4 different areas. One is to preserve and restore open space and natural lands. And to that extent, we are considered a conservation land trust. The second area of our mission is improving our rivers and streams, focusing on water quality and stream health. The third area is community education and outreach. Our community-based conservation work focuses on local community-based work where we're working with local community members on meaningful and relevant conservation projects in their communities. And our fourth area is that we actually run an organic vegetable farm here in Naperville. It's a community-supported agriculture program. We work with more than 600 families and 6 food pantries throughout the area and providing them with organic, healthy, and nutritious food grown in a sustainable manner. Now, we do this work because we feel very strongly that our mission helps improve the quality of life in our communities, helps build and create healthy communities where people want to live, work, and raise their families. We also believe very strongly that regardless of where people live or their socioeconomic status, that everyone deserves to have clean water, clean air, healthy food, and access to nature as a way to be healthy and happy. So if you'd like to learn more, please visit our website and follow us on social media. And hopefully, if you're not a member, hopefully you'll consider becoming a member of the Conservation Foundation today. Today's event is sponsored by DuPage County Stormwater and also Christopher B. Burke Engineering, so we thank them very much. We've had a more than 2 decades partnership with DuPage County Stormwater. Not only are they supporting the event today, but also they've been working with us for years on our Conservation at Home program, sponsoring our DuPage River Sweep, which this year is May the 4th. Storm drain stenciling, and many other programs to inform, educate, and engage local citizens in DuPage County on how to take better care of our water. So we thank them very much for doing that. So with that, Amy, I'm going to turn it over to you and to introduce our speakers. And thank you again all for coming today. Amy is our DuPage County Program Director. Amy?
Hello, everyone, and apologies for that. We thought we got it in rehearsal, and apparently we have some technical difficulties once it opened up. So we'll get back to that as soon as we can figure that out. But right now I want to say welcome, everyone, to this event. We're super excited to have these experts and thought leaders from across the region here to help elevate the standard of stormwater practice in DuPage County and across the region. Today's knowledgeable speakers will talk about infrastructure design, policy development, flood resilience, and adaptive management of natural areas. We will have 5 presentations. And then there, in the middle, somewhere around there, we will have a 10-minute break. As you were notified by Zoom, this is being recorded, and it will be uploaded to YouTube. And everyone that is attending today will have the option of having 3 professional development hours, and that will be sent to you in email as a follow-up next week. During the webinar, everyone is muted and their cameras are off. If you have a question, please use the Q&A box. The chat, things tend to get a little bit lost. So our panelists and moderators will all be able to answer questions in the Q&A. And so for general internet safety, you should only be able to see what the presenters and the moderators put in the chat, but just in case we missed a setting, please click on any, don't click on any. that don't come directly from us. So with that, we'll get started. Low salt design. Why are we designing for the 4th of July instead of the 4th of January? This is our first speaker is Connie Fortin. She's an expert in chloride awareness and chloride reduction strategies at the civil engineering firm Bolton and Mink. Connie's focused on creating a built environment which is designed for and conducive to water management, preventing the problem instead of fixing it after it occurs. She will share a few of her 10 concepts and improve water performance. So thank you for joining us, Connie.
Well, nice to be here. Let me make sure we get the screen. Can you see my presentation?
Looks great.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Once again, I'm Connie Fortin. I'm a low salt strategist at Bolton and Mink, and I have kind of a unique story. I spent most of my career working on the chloride problem by training winter maintenance professionals. Now, I'm pretty confident that most of you know about the chloride problem, but just in case you don't, the chloride component of salt ends up in our water and it stays there forever. It's toxic to aquatic life at a very low level, and it's also a drinking water taste standard. So we have a really difficult time keeping our surface and groundwater below these standards. And the standard basically is take 1 teaspoon of salt, put it in 5 gallons of water, stir it up. We got to keep our water less salty than that. If you have questions about the chloride pollution problem, we're well versed to answer that, but I'm going to assume you know about it. My background for 20 years, 25 years is I trained thousands of winter maintenance professionals, a lot of them in DuPage County, Lake County, Will County, Kane County, in your area. And as I trained these 20,000 or so winter maintenance professionals, they trained me. They would often come to me after a class or during a class and complain about the way an intersection was designed, a parking lot, a ramp, stairs, bridge, you name it. They're like, it's not all our fault. So 3 years ago, well, 2 years ago, I guess, my company was acquired by Bolton and Mink, civil engineering firm. And I realized I had the perfect opportunity to share all the stories I had learned from the winter maintenance professionals to the people that design all these salted surfaces. And although I spent most of my career in the middle of this triangle, trying to drive down salt through it's more efficient winter maintenance, I realized we have a really big opportunity to reduce the need for salt right from the top. Because we don't apply salt because it's fun. We do it because our pavements aren't performing. So I'm just going to share with you some of the things I've been telling our civil engineering team, and I think you'll find it very interesting. In the chat, I think Amy's going to put in a few links. I did a podcast for Public Works nerds, and it's kind of interesting because it weaves in winter maintenance and infrastructure design as we kind of arm wrestle the chloride problem. So if you want to follow that discussion, you'll have that chance. I'm not gonna, well, I think it's gonna try to play it. Let's make sure I can get off this slide. Okay, well then, I guess they put the link in my slide. I don't want that. So after working for a civil engineering firm for about a month, I sent the president of the company this email, and it's about 1,000 people in this company. But I was so excited. I said, if we design for better winter performance, we have so many benefits. We're going to create safer surfaces, take the pressure off of the winter maintenance pros, reduce the need for salt. And when we do that, when we reduce the need for salt, we get all those ecosystem benefits of better water protection, protect our soils, wildlife, vegetation, but also our infrastructure. So when we look at that top of the triangle and we start improving winter performance, we just get so many benefits. And so we name our initiative Low Salt Solutions. That's kind of the umbrella. And then underneath it, there's a bunch of branches. And the first one that I've developed is low salt design. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. My goal for 2024 is to get low salt planning up and running, but we're not there yet. So we're going to talk about low salt design. This is a little peek into our internal library. These bluish gray squares are each of the areas of thought that I want to integrate into design. And this kind of brown square is some tools that we can use in all of our other areas. On the right side, you see some icons that we now put on our plan sheets, not on our construction set, but as an educational sheet or two to our client, so they can see what we did different in design to reduce the need for salt. In addition to creating an internal library with all sorts of things in there, I created a half-day training, similar to many of the training programs I've created for Minnesota or that I've taught in Illinois. And we've brought most of our civil engineers, landscape architects, planners, and technicians through it internally. And we're starting to bring this out to some pilot communities. So what are these things we're telling our engineers to think about? Winter. All right, here's an example. One of the things I want them to do is use the sun. It's free. Nature is out there. Let's put it to our advantage. So in this very easy graphic, you can see wherever we have a shaded surface in the winter, it doesn't perform as well. It's more icy, slippery, dangerous, requires more maintenance and more salt. So in something just as easy as selecting the species of tree or the placement of tree, we can get much better pavement performance. And it's not just trees, it could be anything that provides shadows. But yeah, if we think we need a real complicated solution, maybe we don't. This is maybe a little more complicated way to look at use the sun. On the left, this is actually something that we had designed back in the day. This is an apartment building in the white. And you can see we now put the sun in our CAD design environment, so our engineers sitting at their desk remember about the sun. The sun's going to shine on this apartment building. It's going to cast a shadow over the front steps, the ADA parking, the underground ramp. And all of this is going to become slippery, require more maintenance, attention, and salt. Then had we rotated the building and the parking lot, where the sun could just shine on the front steps, on the underground parking ramp, on all this. This is a very easy site to maintain in the winter. So we want our designers to always optimize the use of the sun in their design. Hope that you're following along. That's pretty easy. We also ask them to outsmart the wind. So in order to outsmart the wind, you first have to know the direction of the winter wind. And this graphic shows you that it looks pretty consistent throughout your state, although there are some variations, local, regional variations. So we put that in the CAD design platform now, the angle of the average winter wind in the community, so they can see it. And then we also look at a map like this that says, how intense is the wind in this region? If you're in those really dark red, purple areas, you better outsmart the wind. Maybe if you're in that lighter or grayish pink area, it may not be your top thing that you have to optimize. We also say, zoom out and see how far the wind blows, carrying the snow before it's going to hit your pavement. If the fetch is over 1,000 feet or that distance of unimpeded blowing, you better do something about it. So it can be more complicated than that, but it also can be that simple. That if you understand the different forces of nature, you can do something about it. Here's a couple things you can do about outsmarting the wind. Snow fence. You know, that's pretty common. There's living snow fence, structural snow fence. There's even solar snow fences these days. The whole way a snow fence works is the wind hits the snow fence. That wind loses its energy. It can't hold the snow and it drops it on the other side. And it drops it before it gets to our road or parking lot. Now, what we sometimes forget is the wind doesn't know if it's an intentional snow fence or an accidental snow fence. So we put our bushes, our rose garden, our park bench on the windward side of our salted surface. And the wind hits it, it loses energy and it deposits the snow, you know, right on the sidewalk or right on our front steps. So these unintentional snow fences, we can sometimes do something quite easy about. We can move the shrubs to the other side of the parking lot or the sidewalk or the park bench, or we can even just trim down the rose bushes before winter. So some basic things we can do to outsmart the wind. This is, I think the thing I like the best, if I just could pick one of the things, and that is our meltwater sprawl. So our engineers design for rain. That was shocking to me when I realized that they don't design for snow. There's no requirements to design for snow. So the plow drivers have to clear the sidewalk, the parking lot, and the road. That's their job. In my opinion, the engineer's job is to not let it come back on those saltable surfaces. This is not acceptable to me, this picture, because this is going to create an ice rink overnight. And we can engineer that problem away. We want to reduce the meltwater footprint. Write that down in a big piece of paper, put it on your door. Here's why. In the Twin Cities, we get about 46 thaw-free cycles. Now, some of them have no snow on the ground. So of course we have no meltwater problem. And some are real brief cycles, not long enough to melt and move the snow. But let's say we have 20 or 30 of these during the winter. They all create things that we show in this top picture. Those are safety risks. Those are call outs to maintenance. Those are salt. But we can design those away. Once we understand our challenge, once we understand the snow falls everywhere and we got to control the meltwater footprint, we can intercept it. And if we can do that, we get rid of a significant portion of our winter problems. Meltwater sprawl. If it's not in your design standards yet, why is that? Now, there are areas that are more prone to these problems than others. Super elevated surfaces are surfaces that are at a slant like this. The lower picture is a ramp. The snowy side is the uphill side. So you can see on this warm day, the snow melted and it moved across the ramp. You can also see a lot of salty residue. You can see tire tracks in the mud. The day I drove by, somebody had knocked over the signal light. It is very hard to keep this safe. We can just see super elevated surfaces to be prone to meltwater sprawl and increased risk, winter risk, and salt. We're also looking at braking zones as a critical area. Like, we are not going to route our meltwater through the braking zone. So are you doing that in your plans? If so, you might want to consider it. The plow drivers know the safety risk areas, and that's what they salt the most. So braking zones is one of them. We don't want to route our meltwater through the braking zones. Vertical drainage is something else. I better make sure I'm not talking too long here. Amy, keep me on track. I could talk forever on this. So exciting. So what I mean by vertical drainage is this. The plow drivers plow the road, the parking lot, the steps, these things. But the snow lands on many other areas, on the roof, on the deck, on the awnings, on the lawn, raised median, parking lot islands. They never plow those. But the snow still melts. And when the snow melts from these surfaces, I do not want it to enter our saltable surface. So you have to pay attention to where the snow's landing and then control the meltwater. Do not let it go across the intersection or across the parking lot or across the sidewalk. That's a new way of thinking of things. So one of our engineers drew up this. All the stuff in blue is where the snow melts that we don't normally pay any attention to. But now in low salt design, we are paying attention to it, and it's creating a whole new way to look at our designs. This is another vertical drainage, example. So the meltwater comes out, used to come out across the sidewalk. Apparently that was too dangerous, so they chiseled out their sidewalk, put in this kind of grate to make it safer on the sidewalk. But they just pushed the problem to the parking lot. So we're trying to fix a poor design, and it's always harder than designing it for winter to begin with. How about if we made it easy to plow? If we make it easy for snow removal to be successful, they will do a better job. If we make an obstacle course for the plow drivers, they can't remove the snow. They'll do the best they can, but nobody's jumping out of the truck with their shovel to get all these weird nooks and crannies that we put in. So look at your designs. Imagine if you were driving a plow truck. How are you going to clear the snow out of here? Do not make an obstacle course. Same for your sidewalks. Don't put the mailbox and the light pole and the park bench and the planter box all spread out over the sidewalk. Group them so the UTV with the blade can plow around them. Just pretend you were in that vehicle. And anybody here who's plowed snow is probably going, yes, absolutely. Now, parking lot islands. Do me a favor. The next day or so, go out and observe the parking lot islands around you. How many of them are green and beautiful like they were designed? They might have had thought about flowers and trees and all this great stuff. Well, the snow gets pushed on them. The snow melts and sprawls. We salt and salt and salt. Another snow comes, we push it up on these islands. These islands cannot survive it. So it doesn't take very long before the trees get sick or die. We cut them down. The flowers turn into ragweed or thistle or dandelions or something else, and it looks bad. So what do? We rip it out and we put it full of rocks or mulch. That is the evolution of a Minnesota parking lot island, and I'm pretty sure yours too. So what purpose are they serving? Are they only obstacles for our plow drivers? Are they only islands to create meltwater, sprawl, and more salting? Are we getting the ecosystem or beauty benefits we thought? It's time to put parking lot islands back on the drawing block and see if we look at it in a 4-season perspective, what we come up with. Snow storage, I'm about done here, I guess. Let's see, how am I doing? Got a few more minutes. Snow storage is a huge problem. Not this year, last year, it's a huge problem. It's not in our designs. In fact, our design engineers don't even know how much space we need for snow storage. I wonder if your design engineers do. We've been doing some data collection over the past 2 years, and with a small data set, it looks like we need between 13 and 30% of the plowshed footprint reserved for snow storage. That's a lot. And when we design our snow storage, we want it on the low side, right? Because when it melts, we do not want it to sprawl all the way across the school parking lot to the front door. So there's a lot of work to be done to improve our snow storage designs. Here's an example of, you know, we see this all the time. This is a shopping mall. Here's a stop sign. So we're looking at an intersection where we have snow storage, huge meltwater sprawl and refreeze. So we have ruined the sight lines. We have created a ice rink, a high salt and a high risk zone. So this is something that we can do much better in our future designs. We launched this initiative 2 years ago, and I've spoken at a lot of events, and I've been asked many times, do we have a manual? And so I sat down over Christmas break and I wrote the low salt design primer. So the ABCs of low salt design, it's going through internal technical review here. Then it will go through some kind of company standards formatting before it's released. So I'm optimistic by halfway through the year, this will be available. I don't know if it'll be for sale or for free or how we're going to do it. But the other thing that I also wrote is the snow garden guide, because I'm sick of rain gardens and I'm sick of parking lot islands. We need to think about a 4-season solution, and our 3-season thinking causes all of these things that we design to be destroyed by our winter use. So what if we designed a snow garden instead of a rain garden? How would the design features look different, and how would it perform for us? So I'm hoping also that this will be out middle of the year. And that's been a lot of fun. So as we're testing our ideas, we have pilot cities now in the Twin Cities. We have 5 of them where we're bringing them through our training. We're looking at problem sites in the winter. We're looking at their policy, their plan review checklist, their parking lot design standards, whatever they want to do, along with our new winter thoughts. And together we're learning a new path forward. So I would just say we have no pilot cities in Illinois, none beyond Minnesota. Maybe that's something we could talk about with the cold climates that you have to deal with. What might that look like? Just kind of throwing that out there. This is a video. I don't want it to play. Shoot. I guess I'm gonna have to. This is a video on YouTube. I think it'll probably be in your chat, that if you want to watch us talk about an example of going through low salt design in a little movie, it's there for you. You can do that. So with that, I'll turn it back to the audience and to our chat to ask me questions about low salt design, about use the sun, outsmart the wind, vertical drainage, horizontal drainage, snow storage, snow gardens. There's a lot of fun things that we can do to design for winter.
Thank you so much, Connie. I have to say, I'm a former architect, and a lot of what you just said really resonated with me. There are, you plan to keep water off a building, and you want to make sure that the structure is designed to hold the snow weight. But where exactly it drains, these are really, really good points. I know we have some interesting questions in the chat.
So kind of, David was wondering that you talked a little bit about parking lots and sort of the
I can't hear the other speaker.
You talked about the parking lots and the islands, but he was curious about chlorides and their accumulation in permeable pavements and permeable parking lots. And if they do accumulate within them, and if so, are they releasing chlorides over a longer period of time? And what is the management strategies for folks who are using permeable pavements in parking lots?
So I'm gonna just kind of answer this, not directly, maybe to answer the question, but I can tell you what, how our design team is looking at permeable pavement right now. Actually, I wonder if I could. How much time do I have? I think I have time maybe to take you. I might just take you into our library. hang on. And you're not supposed to be in our library because it's, you know, not for the public, but I want to talk about alternative pavements. And I'm not an expert on them, but I do have an opinion just because of watching maintenance struggle. This is my opinion on permeable pavement. That in the winter, we really get no or very little advantage of permeable pavement if it's in the shade. I mean, it might give you slightly better winter performance than standard pavement. But if we can place that permeable pavement in the sun, then I think we actually get a great result. But when we design these, we don't often think about the winter sun and shade and the placement of those permeable pavements. Also, the other thing, my opinion of pavement alternatives as far as design, and I know design considers a lot of different things, but I've worked with a lot of plow drivers and they're afraid of the alternative pavements, like what kind of cutting edge, could I salt it, should I salt it, oh, what, you know, what am I gonna do about it? And also the designers are afraid of it too. Like, we don't really know, it's more work, it's a little mysterious. So what I say in design, and you guys can prove me wrong, is let's use the real easy things. Use the sun, outsmart the wind, control that meltwater sprawl. And if we get into a tough situation, like we're in the ambulance bay, in the north side of the building where the wind is blowing and it's shaded and, you know, the gutter is draining right down onto it, it's a really good time to use alternative pavement. Let's go look at those heated pavements. Maybe not for the whole 494 interstate, but when we got a tough winter problem to solve, it's really good time to use them. And then it's not so scary and it's really smart. So that's kind of not answering our person's question, but it's just a little my insight anyhow.
Yes.
Okay, and the final question was, when you were talking about some of the tools that you're using in the low salt down, have you looked at snow melting machines and considered those as part of low salt design?
Yeah, yes. So with snow storage in tight corridors, especially, you know, what are we going to do about it? You either have to store it, or you have to store some of it, or you have to haul it, or you can melt it. And I'm not against melting it. I mean, it does use a lot of energy. But we can also have zero meltwater sprawl, which means we could likely reduce 20 extra salting events by not just piling it in some location that's going to run across that parking lot or ramp over and over again. So I'd love to see a study that sees the benefit. And also, I don't know if Stephen McCracken's paying attention, but he likes to do research. Here's one that I've been trying to get somebody to research. You know, for decades, we say, don't push the snow into the rain garden, don't push it into the pond because we're going to ruin both. But that's true, we will ruin both. I don't know what the cost is and how fast we ruin them. But if we don't push them into the low spot like that, and we leave them on the high spot, and we have to deal with that meltwater sprawl and refreeze and resalting, and we know every ton of salt creates $2,000 to $17,000 of infrastructure damage. If we balance the winter and the summer penalties and advantages, what would we then recommend? Would we recommend pushing the snow in the pond or not? But we've never put that cost of the meltwater sprawl and refreeze into our equation, into our analysis. So we don't know.
Hey, Connie, would you mind unsharing? And then we have one more question.
I would love to unshare if I am smart enough to figure out how to. I don't, let's see, maybe I have to escape out of this.
So while you're working on that, our final question was talking about deciduous trees.
Oh,
And
yeah.
if you would recommend planting those on the south side of a parking lot so the sun can reach it in the winter, but then they can shade cars in the summer. So strategic siting of specific types of trees.
Yeah, so the deciduous trees are brilliant because we can reduce that heat island, right? But we don't have to have the winter penalty of that shade in the winter. So I think that's good. I mean, I know that some people are gonna say, well, we got the leaf litter and the phosphorus loading and stuff. We got to make sure we're not creating that problem too. And there isn't a perfect world, but I do think that if we did the analysis of planting trees in islands, and does that really work? Or how much shade and where should we plant them and how do we create this ecosystem that can survive and allow winter performance? We're going to come up with some brand new looks at design. I think our cities are going to change what they've been traditionally doing.
Well, thank you so much, Connie, for sharing all of that. I really appreciate your time. I thought it was a very interesting conversation, so thank you. You can go ahead and stop sharing. David, if you want to start sharing your screen.
Yes, I can't figure out how to stop sharing, or I would.
Well, as David is pulling his up, I will go ahead and introduce him and Christine. So David Romero and Christine Hawking are our new speakers. They are civil engineers with the city of Warrenville. Christine serves as stormwater administrator for the city and has over 20 years of experience in the private and public sector. David serves as the community development department, reviewing permits and inspections, as well as serving as staff liaison for the Environmental Advisory Commission. They will share their journey to roll out new ordinances that help reduce pollution on each property. So thank you and welcome to David and Christine. There you are.
Good. Yeah. The window was hidden. So
Okay, can you go ahead and
Okay.
share?
Yep. Can you see it now?
Absolutely, looks great.
Okay. All right. So good morning, everyone. As Amy mentioned, my name is David Romero. I am the civil engineer for the city of Warrenville. I'm also a staff liaison for the Environmental Advisory Commission. So coal tar sealant, to ban or not to ban. Now, that may be a question that for some of you, your community has already answered that, where you work, where you live. And so maybe the question has already been answered. For some of you, maybe it hasn't, and maybe you're coming today trying to get some more insight on it, or you have looked into it and you're unsure of the data or the process of getting a ban into place, and not sure if maybe your leaders or staff or residents might be in support of it. Whatever place you're coming from, we hope that by sharing Warrenville's story today, you might inspire your community to take the step to reducing coal tar use. So before we get into it, one question I want to pose out there to you is, when you envision government's role, local government's role, what 4 key words might come to your mind? It may seem like a basic educational question, but it kind of sets up the stage for Warrenville's journey in banning coal tar. And when I thought about it, these were the 4 words that kind of came to mind. I feel like governments provide, they serve, they protect, and they inform. And when you think about these roles, there are many tools that we can use to try to accomplish these roles. As you can see, I've placed on here some of those tools. These are obviously not a comprehensive list of tools that governments can use, but you'll see as I go through our presentation, these were some of the ones that we did. And then one thing that you're going to encounter as you kind of go through these steps of trying to implement new initiatives into your city is, do you have the support that you need, right? I know it sounds simple, but there are many groups that need to play into this factor of whether it's a band, whether it's a new license or type of permit or whatever, a fee structure. It's important to kind of collaborate and keep communication with all these groups. So if you're not familiar with Warrenville and where we're located, I know probably many of you on this call are probably from DuPage County, but we are a small western suburb, about 27 to 30 miles west of DuPage County. We are one of probably the smaller communities in DuPage County. This is kind of a snapshot of Warrenville. Warrenville was founded in 1833 by Julius Warren. He came from New York. He started up a mill here in Warrenville. And as Warrenville became more urbanized and moved, obviously from mills and farming to more commercial and retail businesses being here. As you can see, we've had some growth since the 50s. We are going back to redo our census since we've had some recent new development, and we're estimating maybe we're around 15,000 now. But even at that, we are a smaller community, and that's something that people who have moved to Warrenville really enjoy about our community, that we have the luxuries and amenities of maybe an urban community, but we also still have this small town feel. And we're known for the preserves around us that people can access, and the natural beauty that they bring, the ability to kayak down the rivers, take walking paths through them. And one, I guess, fun fact is I originally from Michigan, and for those who maybe are familiar with Michiganders, a lot of times we generally or sometimes do when maybe we're trying to refer to where in Michigan we live in, is we use our hand, right, as a form of kind of explaining Michigan geography. And so when I first started working at Warrenville, one of the things that I looked at was trying to get a sense, a feel or understanding of the boundaries of Warrenville, and what does it look like to me. And to me, I felt like it looked like a particular animal. I don't know if it looks like that to you, but I felt like it looked like a miniature schnauzer. So maybe you have something now to refer to as Warrenville. Not that we're miniature schnauzer, but it's something fun to consider. Going back to our desire and care of a small town and our appreciation for natural beauty, we started a Natural Areas Commission around 1986. They obviously helped to oversee public areas. Heard from our former mayor, Vivian Lund, that actually there was also a time where the city had its own greenhouse and grew and maintained trees. Apparently, she also gave away free seedlings to people who had who gave birth in the city as kind of a welcome. Shortly in around the early 2000s, I think 2007, the commission changed to the Environmental Advisory Commission. And with that, I think the roles and responsibilities were also a little better documented. So currently the commission, one of the main things is to educate the public about environmental issues, to oversee our Arbor Day event. We have actually been a Tree City USA recipient since 1987 and have received that recognition annually since, with the exception of 2 years. So it's something that as a city we're proud of. The Environmental Advisory Commission also makes recommendations to City Council, or there are times where City Council will ask for their advice. And then they also, in addition to participating and planning for the Arbor Day event, they participate in DuPage River Sweep and take on other initiatives. So what's the connection with our Environmental Advisory Commission and coal tar? Well, from what I could find, I recently became the liaison back in 2021. So I've only been with the commission for a short time, but it really started with a 2011 Chicago Tribune article that came out highlighting the environmental and health effects of coal tar in light of USGS researchers finding recent findings of high levels of PAHs in driveway dust in the village of Lake in the Hills. And this article actually came out a meeting, I'll talk about that later, on the very meeting that EAC had. So this article brought to light these high levels that they found. It also touched on how toxic coal tar can be to aquatic animals, how also there were kind of historical documents or findings, knowing that people who have worked in the coal tar industry, such as chimney sweepers or have worked on railroad, laying railroad ties, their exposure to it over long term has led to cancer, such as scrotal cancer or skin cancer. It also touched on areas that in the Chicagoland region, such as Oak Park and Little Village, became cleanup sites for former coal tar companies that deposited some of their waste in the nearby property. So this is a cautionary statement that Lake in the Hills posted on their website shortly after this article came out. And in fact, they still have it on their website. I think it's the same wording, but a little different look. So you can obviously see that they're still concerned about the effects of coal tar. So as I mentioned earlier, the Tribune article came out on January 18, 2011. That very night, our EAC had the regular monthly meeting, and that really started up the discussion to what can we do in our community. A couple of months later, they started kind of planning of how can we try to educate the public about this, what can we do? By already September of that year, they had come to the committee of the whole meeting with an idea of a type of educational outreach to the community. They wanted to do a library series, and back then they had, there was the requirement to present and get approval from city council to go forth with this presentation, and before they actually went out and did it. Oops. And then, as you can see, a week later, city council approved that proposal, and then already by the following year in April and May, they were able to present the library series. From what I could tell, it was successful. I'm just gonna quick touch on their presentation. I added a few additional slides for visual assistance, but with the slide on the left, one of the things that I kind of want to hit home here is this is not just a hazard to animals or to the surrounding environment. It's also a hazard to humans or vice versa, right? It's a hazard that, as you can see on the picture depicted on the right-hand side, it starts off with the asphalt getting abraded by tire tracks. It creates that into dust, which that dust then can be carried by wind onto soils or tracked into our shoes, into our home. Rainwater can take it into our storm sewer system, and then it goes directly into our rivers and streams. The byproduct of coal tar is PAHs. PAHs are polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. They're produced or formed by the incomplete burning of coal, oil, basically organic substances. Even grilling your food, charring your food has some level. The main concern is the level of concentration of PAHs in coal tar. And in coal tar, there are way considerably higher concentrations than they are in asphalt. And so the primary exposure levels are you can inhale the dust, you can skin contact or ingestion. And then also it tends to have a higher effect on children. They're more susceptible to its effects. This obviously, as I stated before here, it's not only hazardous to humans, but also to aquatic animals. It's really toxic. PAHs are pervasive. They're a sediment. They don't dissolve. As you can see on the top picture here, that's a picture of I believe it's the gallbladder here of salmon, small salmon, I think it was, and this is after being exposed to high levels of PAHs. You have the effects of a dark bile there, where this is kind of a healthy gallbladder on the bottom. And it's something that affects obviously our local streams. On the right here, I believed our commission received this graphic, I think from DuPage River Salt Creek Work Group. They had done some studies, I think, in the early 2000s. And what you see here are the red circles are tests that were done on the water, and the number you see 1 through 7 as listed for the red dots, that's the number of different PAHs that exceed PEL, probable effects level or limit. It's the kind of the concentration of PAHs, in my understanding, that where there's a large percentage of aquatic animals that are showing a toxic response to the PAHs. I set up this presentation slide just to show kind of the stark difference in seal coal products with the concentration levels of PAHs. Here you can see coal tar could be around 66,000 milligrams per kilogram, where maybe some other non-coal tar seal coats might be as low as 50. There are alternatives out there, such as asphalt, I think some oils, acrylics. Obviously, you don't have to go with asphalt as your type of pavement choice. But if you are sealing an asphalt parking lot or driveway, an asphalt emulsion is a better route than coal tar. One obviously question that a lot of people have is, well, what's the cost difference? This is an example from Seal Master. They're a popular seal coat company out there. On the right-hand side, you can see the price difference between coal tar and asphalt. Asphalt now is actually cheaper. It provides better flexibility. It supposedly doesn't crack as much. Granted, there is the argument that coal tar might be a little better at oil and fuel resistance, but is it really the payoff for the hazard that it causes to both workers, children who might be playing on it, and the environment? I place this on here as a reference for you. I imagine that our presentation will be dispersed to you. If you want more supporting data out there, there's a ton of it that's been done over the years by the USGS, Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, EPA, other scientific journals. If you're looking for local advice, I wouldn't necessarily come to me. I'm a civil engineer. I only have a very beginner to intermediate level understanding of water and sediment quality, but obviously you can reach out to staff at DuPage County, DuPage River Salt Creek Work Group. I imagine people at the Conservation Foundation might be able to help you. Obviously, you can come to us if you're wanting to find out more of our process and how to implement a coal tar ban. So at this point, I'm going to pass off the presentation to our other presenter, Christine Hocking.
Thanks, David. So as David was mentioning, the AAC had this library presentation in 2012 in May and April. So what really happened after that point? With that motivation from that library session, they made a presentation at the Cantera Owners Association. This is important because Cantera is the area of town where we have a lot of large parking lots, big commercial businesses, Targets, Lifetime, a movie theater. So it was very important for EAC to talk about the effects of coal tar on any types of sealants they were using for their parking lots. So that was more of the education piece. Following that, the next year we found that there was not really a discussion at the EAC, but in 2014, when NECA was starting to talk about a ban. So EAC discussed it internally, again, more motivation at that point, let's try and bring this to city council and make it a ban within the city. They even created a work group to discuss it. But unfortunately, after that point, things really slowed down in the following 4 years. There were a lot of initiatives at that time, anything from Arbor Day, the river sweep, they were doing storm drain markers, native plants, recycling. There were a lot of initiatives going through at that point, and there just wasn't a lot of ambition to keep moving forward. It was hard because we would be the first one in DuPage County. There was hesitation, I think, a little bit from staff's perspective. We had designed and constructed a permeable paver road back a few years behind, and now we were planning on totally reconstructing the road and turning it back into pavement. So there was a little bit of hesitation from being the first. We were the first permeable paver road, I think, in DuPage County at that time, and now we're removing it. I think staff and the council didn't want to be the first to initiate a ban from that perspective. So those kind of changed that trajectory for those 4 years. But in 2021, there was David came on board as you heard, as the staff liaison, and as part of that, he was trying to figure out how to get a fresh new look into all of their initiatives and processes. And one of them was creating a spring newsletter insert into what the city of Warrenville's newsletter, it's called the Hometown Happenings. It goes to all residents and businesses within the city. And so this insert talked about various environmental initiatives or things that, you know, information for residents to have. And one of them was on coal tar sealants on driveways. Talked about just exactly what David had mentioned about the hazards of that. So this was more of a informational thing that the AC placed in the Hometown Happenings. And following that, in August, a local contractor met with the EAC, and we think it's because of that newsletter, because of the Winnetka potential ban, there were just more information out there about coal tar that was more in the public face. He came to the meeting, was like, hey, you know, maybe we should really talk about this and maybe bring it up to a city council level. He's also a plan commissioner, so he knows how you know, you need support from multiple levels in order to bring something like this to the city council and to staff. So EAC submitted a memo to the city staff. This is typically how our commissioners do. They research information, then they present it to staff. It had all the information about why the city should do a ban. Furthermore, Deerfield had already implemented a ban, and so we had some more information on how a city could do it, what we needed to do, what a template ordinance could look like. And so that information in that template ordinance from Deerfield was presented in 2021 November at we call it committee of the whole meeting with the city council, so that the committee could recommend the city council to approve a ban. So that recommendation was made at November. And then 5 months later, in April of 2022, city council approved the ban. Now, why did it take so long in between the two? Well, Deerfield's ban ordinance was very specific to Deerfield, and staff wanted to make sure that this ordinance was written to make sure that it would be successful within the city, that staff could implement it and educate the public, and also that we would have some type of enforcement of that ban, and what would that look like. So it was a little different than Deerfield's ordinance, but it was tailored towards Warrenville. And with that city council approval, in the ordinance, it talked about how when specifically the ban would go into effect. So as you can see, that was almost 9 months later that the actual ban would go into effect, and coal tar would not be able to be used in the driveway sealants. So from that point, like, why was there this long delay for the ban to go into effect? Well, obviously from point A to point B in a time frame, we can't just say, oh, everything's banned. That was in the middle of the year. Driveway sealant companies were already doing work within the city. It's not fair to say automatically, oh, these driveway sealant companies can't can't be in the city. So it took that long to educate, coordinate and collaborate with all of the stakeholders. Obviously the contractors, city staff was already aware of it. We needed to communicate with the residents because they're the ones who obviously hire the sealant companies. EAC was involved with, you know, trying to produce some of that information, resident FAQs. Obviously, David was a core in the middle of all that as the staff liaison. We did different types of digital outreach using our communications coordinator to help with that. Facebook, our website, FAQs, we have news, highlights, etc. We also went the extra step and we mailed letters to all of the sealant companies, the HOAs, and commercial property owners. This was a mass mailing with a letter that described why we were doing the ban, when it would go into effect, and what those sealant companies or what whoever hired the sealant companies would need to look for when hiring a company. Finally, we did create a license for these sealant companies. It was $100. The application is online as a PDF. And so with this, we would be able to know and review the information from the sealant companies to ensure that they weren't using coal tar. Quick review of obviously the information, and then those list of sealant companies that were licensed would be placed on our city website for all the residents and HOAs and commercial property owners to know who they could look to for their to provide service to them. And of course, last but not least is relaying this process to all departments. It was spearheaded in community development, but it affected all the other departments in terms of when people would call in with questions, stop at the counter, go on our website. So it was very important to get that message out to everyone to ensure that everyone was on the same page from the staff's perspective. Some examples of digital outreach are shown on the screen right now. On the left side is our kind of news highlights that our communications coordinator puts out on our website. So when there's something that just happened that's informative for the residents and the community, she puts these little like highlights, I call them, on brief overview of what the issue is or what the information is to show. It's always located in our news section if you go back or if you search on our website. So we also have a Facebook website, webpage. So she put the information on there about license requirements going into effect back. This was, you know, in 2023. Obviously, that's dated December 27, 2022. So informing everyone. And the license is a year license. So most recently, as part of this next year, she also posted again right in December, November, December, just reminding everyone that licenses are required for coal tar sealant companies. We do not have a permit, and I can get a little bit more into that as we move through the slides. This is an example of the mailer, the letter that we sent to all the sealant companies, talking about the ordinance, talking about when it was when the ban is implemented, information for our website, contact information to David. So, you know, outreach is very important when these types of initiatives and bans go into place. When you're a municipality, the more information you get out there, the easier it is for residents, owners, and contractors to understand why, and obviously the when, and it makes it easier for us as staff to explain things or to direct people to the information. Like I said, our license application is on our website. We're going through a big ERP, so eventually this will be more digital, but we have a PDF that the coal tar sealant company or the sealant companies can fill out. It's reviewed by staff. Takes about an hour, hour and a half. So that's why the $100 cost for the license. And then we put a list of their licensed companies on our website for everyone to take a look at. In addition to our website, we have a FAQ. Our FAQ is not specifically for EAC or environmental type of aspects, but all frequently asked questions for residents and others in our community are on our website as a FAQ. This one obviously is more geared towards the coal tar ban and why. But that also is another tool that we use. We direct people when emails come through, or if someone calls in, we can easily search. Anyone in the city can search on our website and know the FAQs and just toggle that and talk to the people, talk to the residents over the phone about why. So 2023 was our first full year of the ban being in place. We had 13 licenses issued, all on our website. We did receive one potential code enforcement violation from a resident who called in and they were questioning the one company that was doing a driveway sealant in various locations. So with that, our code enforcement obviously went out there, talked with the company. They had already done the sealant. They had stated that they did not apply coal tar sealant to the driveways. They did not have a license. There was no active violation because we could not prove that they had used coal tar. And after further discussions with them, they decided, you know, it wasn't worth all the rigmarole or the $100 to get a license, and decided not to pursue a license. And I don't think that they've pursued a license in 2024 either. But, you know, generally, we think as staff, that's positive that it was really only one code violation. We have 13 potential companies that residents can use that have licenses. So we figured that that was a good thumbs up, you know, good result for the first year. Like I said, we posted this information on our Facebook website. Some comments that we saw regarding our ban, that we were going to ban, or back in 2022 when the information was coming out. You know, this one obviously is from a sealant company, but and they don't use coal tar. So, you know, they said good news. We were the first and only one in DuPage County to ban it. And that was true at the time. I believe there are some other communities in DuPage County that have fully banned coal tar, but it's great to get that type of recognition from a coal tar or from a sealant product company. And then of course, other Facebook comments related to the post, the first post that we had. You know, obviously there's people that understand it, support it, think it's a great thing. Other ones think it's just the city trying to make a buck, even though it's $100. And then also, you know, people are questioning, you know, it's Facebook comments, so you got to take it with a grain of salt. But with all of these comments, you know, we have a communications coordinator that sends information back to them, puts the information related to their frequently asked questions, like the website, and always generally responds to all of these Facebook comments. But, you know, as you know, if you work in a municipality, you're going to get Facebook comments, you know, all across the gamut: pro, con, for, against, why, or just random comments. So, but it's good that people are talking about it and looking at our posts. I'm going to turn it back over to David. He's going to go over our final closing thoughts and kind of summarize everything about, yeah, our coal tar ban.
Thanks, Christine. So, yeah, just to highlight some of the things that we talked about once again, coal tar, it doesn't affect just animals or just humans. It's both. It is something that's been well documented out there by various agencies. And as I mentioned before, you can reach out to some local experts. There are alternatives out there, and the alternatives are not cost prohibitive. And if you're a smaller community, maybe you're not sure what to do. You know, we're a smaller community as well, and there are plenty of other communities now that have banned that, and you can reach out to try to get guidance from, such as Winnetka Deerfield, Highland Park, Northbrook, South Barrington, Cook County, I think Evanston. And if you're not ready to take the step of the ban, you know, maybe you don't have an environmental commission in place. So maybe it's that, maybe it's just using your communication coordinator to try to put out education, educate the public, educate your contractors. There's always something that you can do. And just to recognize and not to get discouraged when maybe processes might slow down. You never know when something can come up and kind of reinvigorate the concept. And as you saw before, we had kind of different stages where things accelerated quicker and slowed down. So just be encouraged to use those avenues of education, coordination, collaboration, and try to include multiple groups in making that decision. And if there's any questions, Christine and I will try to help answer them.
Yeah, we actually have quite a few questions. I have a question just from a homeowner's perspective. Is it obvious the difference between coal tar and asphalt when it's being applied?
There is a noticeable stronger odor with coal tar. I haven't done like as far as application, there are different like with asphalt. There are different parameters that you have to use, like as far as weather and an application and curing time than coal tar. I believe coal tar, you could possibly do it in a little bit colder temperatures than the asphalt. The contractors would obviously be more familiar with those particular conditions according to the manufacturer's specifications.
Okay, great.
Some more questions specifically related to coal tar would be, can you apply a asphalt-based sealant directly over a coal tar sealant? Or is there some prep that needs to happen? Like if you're switching from a coal tar to an asphalt base? Do you know?
I don't know. My guess is that you could apply it. I don't know. Honestly, we here, our own pavement areas, our public works department doesn't do any kind of seal coating. And so internally, we haven't experienced that process.
And if somebody was looking at, like a homeowner or even a municipality was looking at doing this, are there specific ingredients or chemical names they should be looking for when they're looking at ingredient lists? Or does it just say coal tar based sealants, like on an ingredient list for a sealant product?
Sure. Yeah. Generally the SCS safety data sheets out there, they're pretty clear. It's going to come up as like coal tar or coal tar pitch. Usually those are the items that you're looking for in the SDS. Otherwise it'll say like some of the basic ones are you're going to have the asphalt in there, and you're going to have things like the aggregate that's in there, such as silica or some of the other items in there. But it's pretty apparent. Menards, well, I know for sure Home Depot no longer sells it. I think also Lowe's no longer sells it. Ace Hardware here in town, we alerted them, and as far as I know, they don't sell it anymore. I'm not sure about Menards, but
and does Warrenville offer any incentives or other programs for citizens to replace their driveway with something other than asphalt, like possibly piggybacking on any other paving contracts or cost sharings or anything like that?
We don't have any kind of incentives or cost sharing programs to help out residents to replace their private driveways. No.
That's
And then-
correct. We do, if there's a city project on the road adjacent to a homeowner, and they're looking to redo their driveway or whatnot. We asked the resident then you can coordinate directly with the contractor. Maybe they can get a better, better bid for their own private driveway. We're not the people, we don't coordinate that. We just ask them to do it themselves. And also, David, if I'm not mistaken, more recently, we adjusted our lot coverage calculations and how lot coverage is done. So let's say you change from an asphalt driveway, which is not permeable, to a permeable paver driveway. That obviously doesn't count towards your total impervious if you're doing another project. But also I believe that it doesn't count for lot coverage anymore. So that's a good thing for residents if they wanted to then add like an addition on their back.
Yeah, I think for certain areas, right? I think
Yeah.
it was like a smaller zoning area properties. We're no longer counting them.
And we're nearing the end of our time before our break, but I did want to ask this last question because I think it's an important one, but kind of be brief with the answer is, obviously during this, there's a lot of controversy and discussions, but what were those main arguments, if you had to summarize them, of people who are in opposition to the ban on the coal tar sealants?
Honestly, we didn't receive any resistance this time around. I wasn't here present when EAC first started kind of educating the public around like 2011, around then. I heard from a former chair who's now still a commissioner that they did receive pushback from the I think some people in the coal tar industry at their library presentations, and I think possibly some other educational outreach. I don't know what those arguments were. It's just hearing it kind of now secondhand. Yeah.
And I think, David, you had mentioned before also that one contractor that was involved in the code enforcement potential violation. I think you had said that he had said that working with asphalt-based sealants was harder than coal tar sealant-based sealants. And whether that's true or not, we obviously have 13 other contractors that are okay using it. So that was his excuse. Whether that's true or not, we have so many other companies that don't believe it's a big issue. So
yeah, we haven't really received complaints from contractors calling us, asking us, why have you done this? This is a horrible idea. We would certainly be open to kind of talking through that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you to Christine and David from the city of Warrenville for that interesting presentation. At this point, we're going to go to a 10-minute break and reconvene at 10:05. So we're going to go ahead and stop the recording, and we'll see you back in 10 minutes. Thank you, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. We're going to get started, but before we start with our next speaker, we wanted to play that video of Chairman Zay from the DuPage County he's a DuPage County board member, as well as the chair of the DuPage County Stormwater Management Committee, and we are grateful for their sponsorship of this program.
Welcome to Beyond the Basics 2024. Good morning, I'm Jim Zay, Chairman of the DuPage County Stormwater Management Committee, and welcome to Beyond the Basics 2024. I'd like to begin by thanking all the speakers who generously dedicated their time and expertise to us today. I'd also like to thank the Conservation Foundation for coordinating and hosting this event. Their partnership with DuPage County is instrumental as we strive to build resilience to reduce flooding impacts and improve the quality of our local waterways. And a final thank you to our other sponsor, Christopher B. Burke Engineering, for helping to make this seminar possible. In a time when weather patterns are becoming increasingly intense and unpredictable, these spaces for exchanging ideas, problems, and solutions are more important than ever. We all play a crucial role in building more resilient communities. As we all know, it can be hard to pull together the space, funding, and time required for large-scale projects, so we're tasked with finding innovative approaches to managing stormwater across all aspects of our work. This can include new strategies for native plant management, redefining best winter maintenance practices, or finding policy solutions that have a big impact without a big burden on staff. Today, we're going to hear presentations that discuss some of these ways to implement stormwater management practices creatively. I hope we can take away some of these valuable insights from these presentations and use them in the future. Thank you again for joining us this morning.
Wonderful, it worked. So thank you for bearing with us our technical difficulties. At this point, I'd like to actually introduce Sarah Hunn, who's the director of the DuPage County Stormwater Management, to say a couple words. Sarah?
Thank you, Amy. And thank you again to all of our presenters. So far, we've already learned a lot, some new things that at least I know I didn't know about or hadn't taken into consideration. And I look forward to the rest of the presentations. I also wanted to thank everybody who is on this. We have over 121 participants, and everybody's taking time out of their day to learn about these valuable initiatives that all are part of our program. And finally, I'd like to thank our Stormwater Management Water Quality team, Mary Beth Falsey, Claire Cassane, and Raul Galvin. They make up the heart of our water quality group, and the water quality program is critical to DuPage County Stormwater Management. It always helps us when we can utilize two different programs, water quality and water quantity, to help achieve our mission of protecting the citizens and businesses of DuPage County from the harmful impacts of stormwater. And so thank you, and I look forward to the next presentation.
All right, thank you, Sarah. So at this point, we're going to introduce our next speaker. Earlier, we were introduced to different and innovative ways of reducing stormwater pollution at the source. So now we're going to transition to the topic of flood resilience and resources that can help guide, especially disadvantaged communities, as they strengthen their resilience to the greater impacts they face as the result of climate change. We have three speakers from the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, CMAP, Kate Ivasic and Alexis McAdams. Kate is the senior planner who works to integrate resilience and equity into decisions about land use and plays a key role for CMAP's climate resilience and mitigation work. Alexis is the research assistant who works on the Flood Susceptibility Index team and is passionate about connecting local communities to the data and policies that impact their lives. And they are joined by project engineer at GeoSyntech, Lee Hauser. Lee is a water resource engineer who provides stormwater management analysis and flood risk assessments across the Midwest. So welcome to each of you. Please take it away. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Amy. And good morning, everyone. Thanks to the Conservation Foundation for the opportunity this morning to present on our flood resilience work at this year's conference. For those of you who are unfamiliar with CMAP, we are the comprehensive planning organization for Northeastern Illinois. Many of you probably know our watershed planning work in the region, but we also work on many other areas that influence quality of life in Northeastern Illinois, which includes building equitable resilience to flooding. So today we're here to share three resources that CMAP, with the help from GeoSyntech, have created to help us gain a better understanding of the flooding challenges that we face in the region, both today and in the future, as well as Amy said, tackling the inequities that exist regarding who floods, who's disproportionately impacted when it floods, and where investments are needed most. So to kick it off, I'm going to hand it over to Alexis to introduce the Flood Susceptibility Index.
All right, thanks very much, Kate. Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexis McAdams, and thanks again for having us here today. So back in 2018, with funding support from the MacArthur Foundation and Community Development Block Grant funds, CMAP created urban and riverine flood susceptibility indexes in order to help identify large-scale priority planning areas across the northeastern Illinois region for stormwater mitigation and resilience planning. So susceptibility index scores, which range from 1 being the least susceptible to 10 being the most, are based on the relationship between known flood locations and various landscape and infrastructure characteristics. We developed indexes for 2 different geographies to reflect the difference between flooding in known floodplains, which is what we call the riverine flood susceptibility index, versus flooding in other areas, known as the urban flood susceptibility index. And that's what's pictured on the right-hand side of the slide here. In this context, urban means developed areas with homes, businesses, infrastructure. We chose to exclude areas like open space, parks, and some agricultural lands that may flood, but there's less of an impact on people and property compared to other areas. Our partners continue to express interest in this index, particularly as county stormwater agencies and communities across our region struggle with both urban and riverine types of flooding and continue to seek good data to make sound and informed decisions. So since we continue to hear a lot of interest in this work, we're currently undergoing an effort to update these indexes with the latest data and following feedback from our partners. Next slide, please. So how does one go about creating a flooding susceptibility index? The first step is collecting information and data on known flooding locations. We gathered up all of the flood event data that we could find, including from FEMA's National Flood Insurance Program and individual assistance claims data. And this makes up the majority of the flood data points that we were able to collect. We also reached out to local partners who collect this information, including the City of Chicago 311 Reports Program, county transportation and stormwater agencies, as well as the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District for even more information on flooding events. In total, we were able to assemble over 160,000 unique flood locations across northeastern Illinois. Next slide. Our second ingredient to our index is assembly of data on different factors that contribute to flooding in more developed areas. And we chose 6 factors. First is the percentage of impervious cover. Next is the presence of a combined or a separated sewer system. Next is the estimated age of first development for an area. Next, we had average precipitation variation across our northeastern Illinois region. We also included whether or not a property's elevation is at or below the nearest base flood elevation. And finally, low-lying areas as identified by a topographic wetness index. So these specific factors were chosen after consulting with stormwater planning agencies and our engineering partners, as well as surveying what kinds of data that we had available to us at the time that covered the entire northeastern Illinois region. So combining those ingredients, we decided to go with a method known as the frequency ratio approach. So this method analyzes the relationship between those recorded flood events and each of the flood-related factors individually. Then once we can quantify and put a number in that relationship, we can combine them together to create a summarized index. So this is a really great method to use when we have partial data. And by that, I mean, we have a lot of data on where floods happen, but we know it's not complete. There are places that flood that aren't recorded or reported, or just don't make it into the data sets that we have access to. However, this method still gives us a way to estimate flood susceptibility for those places, even though we don't have a fully complete set of data. This is also a pretty useful method for areas that we know are susceptible to flood, but we just haven't recorded floods recently in our time of study, but there is a possibility of flooding in the future. Next slide. So this approach is a little easier to understand with an example. Across northeastern Illinois, about 15% of the region is covered by a combined sewer system, or 15.8%. However, when we look at our flood locations data, we notice that about 27.4% of all flood locations, of all flooding events are happening in these combined sewer areas. Since this is a higher percentage, we notice that combined sewer areas are seeing more than their fair share of flooding compared to the rest of the region. And these percentages are what we divide in order to obtain a frequency ratio of about 2.35. Any frequency ratio above 1 indicates a higher correlation than we would expect if flooding was something that happened completely randomly or happened everywhere equally. So this is an example of producing a frequency ratio for just one of our flood factors. We repeat this process for all of the flood factor information that we are able to collect. Sometimes we divide those flood factors into categories or percentiles of equal size. And then we add up all of the frequency ratios we were able to collect and normalize them on a 1 to 10 scale to produce our index. So finally, we have some brief results of this analysis, and to summarize it extremely briefly, I don't want us to be here too long. We saw the highest frequency ratios for areas with combined sewer service areas, areas where impervious coverage is between 35 to 70%, areas that tend to get more rain, very shocking, I know, and areas that were developed prior to 1974, or estimated to be developed prior to 1974. And of course, areas that match all of these traits would see extremely high combined index scores. So feedback from our partners was positive at the conclusion of this analysis, and we received a lot of really great questions and suggestions. Some things that were flagged for us included addressing limited flooding data for certain parts of our region. We weren't able to connect with every county agency that we wanted to at the time to see if they had information for us, and some places just weren't able to collect it at the level of detail that we needed for this analysis. Our partners also asked us to think about ways to easily rescale the index, particularly for areas like Will and McHenry County. You can see in this image to the right that high index scores in Chicago and Cook County areas can kind of blow out the color scale of the map, making it really hard to see localized hotspots in areas like McHenry, Kendall, Kane, and Will counties. The results are available now on CMAP's Data Hub for download and analysis if you'd like to check this out yourself. And we also include a fuller methodology appendix document with more detail about the frequency ratios, the data we used, and the flooding events data. So if you're interested in more details, please check it out. So there are a few different ways that CMAP and our partners are using the index. It's used as a preliminary screening tool for hazard identifications, such as in the Cook County Hazard Mitigation Plan, or HMP. Here at CMAP, we use it to help identify areas for stormwater planning assistance, and other agencies in our area are doing the same thing. It's also been used to prioritize and select mitigation and resilience projects based on need, in combination with other data and analysis that CMAP produces. And finally, we were excited to be able to share the assembled flood factor data for other researchers and analysts, and you can see that on our data hub. But unfortunately, we're unable to do the same with the flood event location data, and this is due to privacy restrictions associated with this data. So trying to protect identifiable information for properties that experience flooding. So like I mentioned earlier, CMAP continues to hear about the value of this tool, which we're very excited about. So we're currently undergoing an effort to update it. This update is supported by congressionally directed spending, also known as an earmark, that we received in September of 2022. We're looking at improving this tool in 3 major areas. First is updating our input data, which includes adding additional flood location information, as well as taking a look at new flood-related factors beyond just those 6 that we initially chose. Next, we're also reviewing our analysis method, the frequency ratio approach, and also taking another look at the geographic extent of our indexes. Is separating the indexes into a riverine and an urban version still what we want to do going forward in the future? And finally, we'll be improving access to the data by producing web-based mapping tools to make it easier for people to view, explore, and reanalyze the index for smaller local areas. So we've made progress in gathering more locally sourced flooding location data instead of relying mainly on FEMA records, although we have, of course, processed updates to that data as well. We also were successful in reaching out to more local partners for flooding information data, including working with regional agencies like IDOT and the RTA. And we are also really excited to include local citizen-reported flooding data as best we could for certain areas of our region. And if you know of projects like this, we'd be excited to learn about them. For flooding related factors, oh, sorry, one more thing. For flooding related factors, we're considering adding include runoff factors, things like soil type, flow paths, catchment characteristics, and future precipitation amounts. And this will begin to let the flood susceptibility index take into account impacts of future climate change. So we're looking forward to completing the update, and we hope you'll be interested in it as well. Please sign up to CMAP's climate newsletter to stay in the loop on our work. We'll have a link at the end of this presentation to subscribe to it, or feel free to reach out to us and we can connect you with how to get signed up for that. So thanks.
Great, thanks, Alexis. So one thing that the FSI doesn't do is consider future impacts from climate change. So next, we're going to hear about a separate flood analysis that is hot off the press, very recently completed to help support our region's transportation resilience improvement plan. And the goal of this plan, which we call the TRIP, is to identify opportunities to improve the resilience of the transportation network to extreme weather and climate change. We're using funding from USDOT to support this and working with a consultant team from ICF, Geosyntac, and High Street to develop the plan. And we're currently assessing the vulnerability of the region's roads, bridges, transit service, and other transportation assets to flooding, as well as other climate hazards like extreme heat. Geosyntac is leading the flood analysis for the plan, so I'm going to hand it over to Lee Hauser so he can give an overview of this work.
Thanks, Kate. As Kate mentioned, my name is Lee Hauser and I work with Geosyntac. And I'm going to talk through how Geosyntac supported CMAP on this Transportation Resiliency Improvement Plan by building on the techniques used for the FSI, but adding a climate resiliency component. So our problem statement for this project focused on being able to understand what areas in the region are at a greatest risk of increased flooding due to climate change in the year 2050. We say climate change in the year 2050, and there's so many potential scenarios, but I'm referring to the business as usual scenario with greenhouse gas emissions, and there aren't widespread greenhouse gas emission reduction policies, which is referred to as the Representative Concentration Pathway 8.5, or you'll see in this presentation as RCP 8.5 scenario. Therefore, our objective for this project was to identify areas at a higher risk for flooding and help CMAP and regional stakeholders be able to prioritize areas in the region for further assessment. This analysis focused on analyzing two scenarios which use the existing rainfall depths with the RCP 8.5 projected rainfall depths. It is important to acknowledge that climate resiliency planning in the urban area focuses on being able to understand and show the flooding impacts due to increased precipitation. The traditional method of estimating flooding impacts relies on both hydrologic and hydraulic models. Unfortunately, we understand that there were cost and data limitations to pursue this traditional approach of developing individual H&H models, which would have been a very refined analysis at the scale. Therefore, we worked to develop an innovative approach where we could build a comprehensive model that integrates H&H across the CMAP region to quantify the changes in inundation, and Geosyntac identified using HEC-RAS 2D rain on grid for that approach. Next slide, please. We decided to use HEC-RAS 2D with the rain on grid analysis because it can integrate both hydrology and hydraulics into a single model. This approach uses high-resolution LiDAR topography to directly represent the underlying terrain to perform the hydraulic computations while accounting for spatial variability in the rainfall across the landscape. As I mentioned earlier, it follows a lot of the technical effort CMAP did with the FSI, but applies a dynamic hydrology component. The rain on grid analysis provides a seamless transfer of precipitation to calculate runoff and perform the hydraulic computations to map the flood inundation. Being able to do this in a single model provides a means to compare two data sets of data to understand the potential climate change risks to critical transportation infrastructure in northeastern Illinois and being able to compare those rainfall events. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, the traditional approach for climate resiliency planning in the urban environment relies on both H&H models to estimate flooding impacts. There are multiple software programs that can look at this, but they can either be very costly or need extensive amounts of data inputs related to storm sewers. HEC-RAS is a free program developed by the U.S. Army Corps and has always been the industry standard for modeling hydraulics within the riverine system. This focuses on using flow hydrographs to simulate flows through the riverine corridors. And here in the middle, you can see an image where you would apply the flow hydrographs up at the upstream ends of riverines and allowing them to flow downstream either based on terrain or a defined slope and ultimately get to the bottom of your model. The U.S. Army Corps has continued to release newer software versions of HEC-RAS that build on its modeling capabilities. A significant advancement came when it added the capabilities for 2D modeling, and most recently, the ability for spatial infiltration capabilities for those 2D areas, which improved the model's capabilities for simulating runoff flows across the terrain when a precipitation hydrograph is applied. Which you can kind of see here in the middle again. You have that same area where you use the riverine flow hydrographs, but then you apply a precipitation data set to the entire region. For this analysis, as I mentioned, we assessed the existing conditions, which looked at the rainfall depths here shown up in the top right corner. For the existing conditions, we had a rainfall depth of 8.57. For the climate change scenario, that increased to 9.1 inches. And then for the 500-year event, we had 11.24 inches, and that increased to 11.93. This was approximately a 6.2 increase in rainfall for the 2015 year scenario. Next slide, please. Now that we have gone through why HEC-RAS 2D was selected, I will kind of walk through how the model was set up. The CMAP region covers 7 counties, multiple large watersheds, and over 4,000 square miles, which can be seen here on the image on the left. Geosyntec used the HUC 4 subregions that either fully or partially overlap the 7 counties to guide the model development. HEC-RAS has some limitations in being able to process larger cells, and we ran into errors around approximately 2 million mesh cells when even using the Amazon cloud computing software. The modeling domains were therefore subdivided into 9 smaller areas based on the HUC 12 boundaries to limit the number of cells and meet that threshold. The boundaries of the 9 smaller areas were clipped down to the CMAP region and served as our final model geometries. And you can see that here on the model on the right. So not all of the model areas were subdivided into smaller regions, but the 9 included Model 1A and 1B, which was the lower and upper Fox, Model Area 2, which was Kankakee, and then we had Model Area 3, which was for the Chicago area, and that was Chicago South and Chicago North. And then we have Model Area 4A or 4, which was then broken into the upper and lower Des Plaines, Model Area 5, which was tributary to Lake Michigan, and then Model Area 6, which was the Kishwaukee. And that is all here shown on the figure on the right. And you can also see that DuPage has subdivided into 3 modeling areas. We will preview some results for this analysis, and that'll focus on Model Area 4A, which is the lower Des Plaines and highlighted in green in the figure on the right. Next slide, please. When building the HEC-RAS rain on grid model in this heavily urban environment, we do include a terrain layer, soils layer, a land cover layer, an infiltration layer, a 2D flow area, and boundary conditions. For this analysis, we use the following data sets to develop it. For the terrain, we use CMAP's 15-foot resolution DEM for the 7 counties, and this allowed us to simulate flooded depths and delineate inundation boundaries. For the soil data, we use the NRCS surrogate soil data to develop runoff curve numbers and additional infiltration parameters. Land cover, we use CMAP's 2018 U.S. land use inventory combined with the Illinois State Water Survey building footprints. For the 2D flow areas, we use the HUC boundaries that were described on the previous slide. And then we also incorporated break lines, which were based on the NHD flow or NHD plus GS flow lines. We use these as ways to define where we thought the concentrated flow would be, and they're basically just the known riverine and streams. And then we had the precipitation data, which I previously mentioned was for the 100 and 500-year events, and they were based on Bulletin 75 for the existing conditions. And then for future conditions, we used ICF model outputs for the projected rainfall depths for the SPC 8.5 climate change scenario. And then the last one was those riverine flow gauges. Here, we use the daily average flows for rivers associated with the HUC 8 names, and we use the USGS gauge data where those riverine systems cross the model boundaries. So for Model 4A, we use the Des Plaines River. Next slide, please. This image here provides an overview of the land cover in DuPage County. The land cover is based on CMAP, as I mentioned, CMAP's 2018 land use inventory, which included 61 different land use classifications. As part of our analysis, we lumped together similar land uses into 20 unique categories. As can be seen here, and all of you are probably aware, DuPage County is a lot of different land use types, but is heavily urbanized and dominated by residential, commercial, industrial, and transportation networks, showing the importance of being able to understand areas that might be at a higher or greater risk for flooding as a result of climate change. Next slide, please. Here we're getting into some of the modeling results. These are the max depth outputs from the HEC-RAS analysis for the existing condition. The lighter blue showing areas that have a smaller ponding depths, while the darker blue are areas that have larger ponding depths. These results are not intended to define the extents to which flooding will occur, but illustrate areas where excess stormwater during larger storm events will concentrate move across the urban and rural landscape after the sewer system capacities are exceeded, and ultimately get into the riverine systems based on terrain, providing that initial understanding of which areas are at a higher risk for flooding, both related to transportation networks and critical community infrastructure. Next slide. Similar to the previous slide, here is an image that shows the max depth outputs for the RCP 8.5 100-year climate change scenario. Now, some of you might be starting to think, I really can't see much of a difference. And rather than trying to flip back and forth on everybody and risk making everybody sick, I will point out that at this scale, it is hard to see those noticeable differences. And we have another map to show that comparison. Next slide, please. Here's that map that shows the differences between the two scenarios. The lighter blue areas have the smaller increase in ponding, while the dark blue areas have a larger increase in ponding. Data sets and maps like these are intended to help aid CMAP's regional planners understand areas that are at higher risk of increased flooding due to climate change. Being able to work with those stakeholders to help them understand which transportation networks could be most significantly impacted by extreme weather and climate change, and being able to prioritize locations for assessing the flood risk in greater detail and identifying opportunities to make the regional transportation network more resilient to climate change. Next slide, please. It is important to acknowledge that this GIS inundation data produced as part of this analysis should only be used for intended planning purposes. This data is not intended to be used to support detailed analysis, such as sizing potential stormwater improvements at specific location or redefining map FEMA floodplain boundaries or adjusting the insurance policies. Some of the limitations and constraints with the modeling effort include the DEM used was not hydraulically corrected, therefore the streams were not burned into the DEM. The waterways in Cook County and the surrounding Chicagoland area are complex and have hydraulic structures such as bridges and culverts that were not modeled within the riverine system. The modeling analysis did not include existing separate or combined sewer infrastructure. Therefore, the results are based on terrain and do not consider these conveyance features intended to manage stormwater runoff. And also, there were isolated instances across the modeling area where sudden transition from larger 2D mesh cell sizes to smaller sizes caused higher than expected water depths. These results impacted small pixels throughout the area, or not throughout the area, and the impacts were negligible when trying to understand which areas are at a higher risk of increased flooding. And as mentioned earlier, the HUCs were clipped to the CMAP boundary. They don't include flows from other streams in the model area, and the flows did not change for the 100 and 500-year events. However, it is worth acknowledging that many of these elements could be minimized as part of future model refinements as the more detailed analysis occurs throughout the CMAP region. And with that, I will pass it back off to Kate.
All right, thanks, Lee. So I'll just say we're excited to have this analysis incorporated into our transportation resilience plan, but we're also interested to find other ways for CMAP and partners to use it in their work to really account for future impacts from climate change. The last resource that I want to touch on really highlights, or that I want to highlight, moves beyond considering where flooding is likely to happen and focuses on who is impacted and how can we make investments that help those people who have been underserved and stand to benefit the most. So this soon to be released guide compiles strategies and best practices for integrating equity into flood resilience investments specifically. But I just want to point out that certainly the practices apply for stormwater investments more broadly, and hopefully to a lot of you attending this conference today. It's written for engineers and planners and provides, case study examples for how governments and other organizations are advancing equity in their work. The guide was supported by the same earmark funding as the Flood Susceptibility Index update, and we also were able to tap into some MacArthur Foundation funds to, very importantly, allow us to compensate 5 community-based organizations for their time and expertise given to the guide. So working with those community partners, we developed 5 key principles that the group really found to be essential for advancing equitable outcomes in flood resilience investments, and quite frankly, for many of these investments more broadly. And they are centering community voices in the decision-making, intentional trust building among government and non-government partners and community organizations and members, prioritizing investments to the areas that need the investment the most, building out and considering holistic solutions that consider the many needs that communities face, and then long-term planning to make sure that what we put in the ground can actually sustain over the long term. So using the key principles to ground us, we then narrowed in on 5 strategies to integrate equity into investment decisions. These generally follow the process of developing and delivering capital investments. So from planning and data analysis and community engagement to operations and maintenance, and really helping lower capacity communities access funds, of which there's so much federal funding in particular right now. And we know that it's challenging for that funding to really get to the towns and communities that need it the most. So just briefly focusing in on the first strategy to use data to inform investments, we identified 10 indicators of equity that we found to be relevant to flooding. Many of these come from Justice 40 guidance through the Federal Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, and others come from EPA's EJ Screen Tool or other local assessments. And once the flood susceptibility index is updated, we want to analyze it against some of these indicators, like income, race, disability, and also considering municipal tax base per capita to identify regional and county trends that can help influence CMAP's planning and policy work. But while we often see these kinds of lists, it's like, okay, great, I'll try to consider these data sets, these indicators in our planning. We wanted to really think through what are specific ways that we can use data on socioeconomics, on demographics, health, and other factors to really help inform flood mitigation work. And so these are just a sampling of questions that we pose, suggestions in the guide, identifying communities that are least able to afford to recover from flooding, identifying communities that may have difficulties evacuating or may experience increased health risks from flooding, as well as communities that will need translation services before and after a flood. And just to conclude, our presentation has been very data focused, and we need to keep in mind that data can't tell us everything. Talking with people who have been hit by flooding to learn about how it happened, how it impacts them, and what kinds of assistance they need and solutions they want to see is really important for us to keep in mind in this work. We know that flooding is more than just a data point. For many people, it's a chronic issue that harms their health, sends them into debt, and in many cases leaves them to really fend for themselves or rely on each other to pull through. And I heard this echoed by many people I talked to who were affected by the flooding in Cicero just this past July, and are still dealing with the consequences. And so as someone speaking personally who tends to oftentimes focus on the data, this work has really reminded me to remember that what we're really trying to do is help people in the end, and especially those who have been historically overlooked and underserved for a long time. So with that, thank you for attending this morning. If you'd like to receive updates, you can use this QR code to sign up for our climate newsletter, and I'll also put some links in the chat. Again, the guide will be coming out soon, and so stay tuned to get access to that important resource. Thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you to all of you. We really appreciate that. For the sake of time, we're going to ask that everybody put questions in the Q&A. We will answer them. We'll text the answers to the Q&A, so you'll have access to that. And if we have time at the end, we will definitely take some live questions. At this point, I'd like to introduce Chris Gutowski. He's going to talk about Champaign's 20-year stormwater journey, Copper Slough Watershed Master Plan to the Garden Hills and beyond. And as a former Illini, I have to say I'm very excited because I saw what Boneyard Creek looked like before this project, and I've seen it kind of evolve over time. So I'm very excited. Chris Gutowski is a water resource engineer and project manager at Clark Dietz. He has 18 years experience working with a myriad of stormwater related projects. And he is also a U of I alumni. And what's really interesting about this award-winning project is it's not just building stormwater resilience into it, but it's also incorporating economic, social, and environmental benefits. So Chris, want to go ahead and share your slides and we'll get started. Thank you.
It's asking me to stop sharing the screen for the previous presenter.
You should just be able to overwrite it.
Okay.
All right, looks
Okay.
good.
Thank you for that introduction. Like Amy said, I've been with Clark Dietz for 18 years, but this journey predates me by just a year or two, and it's really it's something that I've kind of experienced firsthand. I've been involved in all these steps along the way, and each of these sections of this journey could really be a standalone presentation. But I found that just taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture of what kind of where they started and where they're currently at is kind of a fascinating journey that I was hoping to share with everybody. One thing I would like to say is that I would kind of envision this presentation as being something that I don't know if you see with the new development concept art come out, and it looks amazing, and then you fast forward a few years and you start wondering if the people that built that development even saw the concept art to begin with, and really there is some reasons for those changes, and that's kind of what I'll touch on through this presentation. So to begin this, Champaign, if you're not aware, is a couple hours south of Chicago. I started my career and lived in the Champaign area for most of my career, but I've since moved up to the Chicago area, but I'm still involved on the day-to-day aspects of these projects. So to start the journey, we'll set the stage. So pre-1990s, there was a lot of channelization. You'll see throughout central Illinois these long straight channels that were built because of roads, because of irrigation for fields, and would take hard right turns at roads and other structures. And so there was a lot of encroachment, limited funds to really do much, but really stormwater was an afterthought. Development kind of took priority. In the late 1990s, that's when the city introduced their current stormwater ordinance. There was a lot of rapid development and redevelopment occurring, and the stormwater solutions that were being implemented were along the lines of speaking with developers and saying, okay, for X amount of dollars, we would like an extra 20% of stormwater volume in your detention basins. And so that's kind of the majority of the effort that the city was kind of pursuing at that time. Typically, they would update their stormwater master plans on a 20 to 30 year cycle and really deal with stormwater on a more management type basis. So looking at the Copper Slough, where this story begins, the Copper Slough is on the west side of Champaign. It's actually the largest watershed in the city of Champaign when you combine it with the Finney Branch. What's shown here in the outline is the Copper Slough. Finney Branch comes to the south. So essentially most of the western half of the city flows into the Copper Slough. Some key aspects, it's along the Route 57 corridor, but there actually is very few interchanges along 57 for Champaign. So you're actually finding a lot of newer neighborhoods popping up on the west side of the watershed, and then the east side of the watershed, east of the river, is predominantly older neighborhoods that were developed pre-1990s and don't have that same kind of standards that the newer developments are having. There's commercial and industrial development scattered throughout this watershed, but they also want to start looking at future development controls in case they needed to go above and beyond their current ordinance to be able to ensure continued growth in this watershed. So some study findings that were contained in that 2007 report was several stormwater conveyance improvements, and those took the form of larger trunk storm sewers. And I've highlighted number 3 here is the West Washington Street. I'll talk in great detail about that project. And then the pipe 1 is the Hedge Road, or what's been now termed the Garden Hills project. And so I'll touch on those 2 projects just because those are the first 2 that have been implemented. For the West Washington project, you can see here the existing sewer in black was a 36-inch pipe that served the neighborhood, jumped up to a 54, and in our Copper Slough watershed master plan, we were talking about replacing that with a 72 or 48-inch or 84-inch pipe. And so that was an extremely large jump in conveyance that would have occurred. And so because of that, you're obviously going to just be moving the problem elsewhere. And so to offset that, we looked at several detention options, and these took the form of large regional detention basins that would utilize open area along the channel that we could bring multiple sewers into and kind of mitigate the impacts of the flows. You can kind of see what we were trying to just manipulate that hydrograph in the main channel. So ultimately, the Copper Sioux Watershed Master Plan was a high-level overview. We weren't looking at the specific neighborhoods. It was more of, okay, what's going to impact the Copper Sioux and how do we make that situation better? Specifically for the West Washington neighborhood, we were looking at somewhere in the range of $15 million in 2007 dollars. And like I said before, we had large sewers, big regional detention ponds, and even some improvements to the Copper Sioux itself, just to make that work. And so obviously with these kind of recommendations, you can't just put in the sewers and expect results, or you can't put it in the detention pond and get results. It's a, one size fits all. Everything needs to get put in place in order to even realize some benefit. And so so that was where we began our journey. And soon after this was completed, there was something that kind of changed everything. And it's what I've kind of termed Battle of the Basins. Here I have shown two stormwater detention basins. On the upper left is the Healy Street, and the bottom right is the 2nd Street Basin. And these basins are actually outside of the Copper Sioux watershed, but this is really where that battle took place to kind of change the city's way of thinking. And generally, one of these basins is considered a success, and the other is considered less successful, I'll say. And the engineer in me, if I had to choose which one I would consider a success, I'm originally going to say, okay, I need more information to make that decision. But if I was forced to make a decision, looking at that bottom right picture, I don't normally design my detention basins with light poles in them. So if I was forced to, I'd probably say that basin. But the public perception doesn't judge the functionality of a detention basin on these conditions. The following slide will show you what the public's really interested in. And if you think about it, the basin's only full or filling or emptying, maybe 10% of the time, a couple times a month. Those big storms maybe once a year, if that. So a vast majority of the time, these basins are going to look like this. And so the engineer in me still can't make a decision on which one. But if you put your perspective in from the public, okay, that 90% of the time where the basin isn't in use for stormwater purposes, now you can kind of see, okay, it's fairly obvious that the 2nd Street Basin here on the bottom right is going to be far superior than the Healy Street Basin. And the unfortunate thing is so the Healy Street Basin was built in the late 90s. That flooding figure was at stage, I believe, around 30 feet. So this total depth of the Healy Street Basin is somewhere around 40 feet deep. The 2nd Street Basin was built and completed in 2012, I believe. And if you're familiar with the Champaign, Urbana, or U of I campus area, you'll realize over the last 10 years or so, Campus Town has gone through a complete change. And so, I mean, they're growing skyscrapers, it seems like, overnight along Green Street. And the reason is because the infrastructure from these two basins, they're only a couple of blocks apart, but these two basins, along with some other infrastructure that isn't visible, has completely transformed the floodplain along and through campus. And so because of that, development is able to occur. And so the public has associated that kind of development, that kind of growth, that kind of economic impact with the 2nd Street Basin. And they see the Healy Street Basin as, well, the city spent all this money and nothing happened. And really, it wasn't, the Healy Street Basin was the first step. Both serve their purposes, both have their place in the overall system, but one doesn't work without the other. And so it's been a challenge to kind of, work with the public to kind of understand that difference. And so that's been what's kind of been the driving force moving forward on a lot of the stormwater infrastructure that the city has taken place. And so, as the engineer in me, I look at an open area, I look at a watershed and say, okay, I got a problem. How do I solve it? And now, you know, things like social, aesthetic, and economic implications are having to drive some of these designs. And that's not necessarily that they take over the design. It's just, it's become a four-prong attack on a lot of these infrastructure projects. And so, there's a bit of education to the public on, you know, where and why this money is being spent, because I can promise you, you know, social, aesthetic, and economic considerations don't typically save you money on a project. And so there is a balance that has to take place. You know, at the end of the day, we're here to solve a problem, but there's in a lot of ways, better ways to manage that money and implement a project that will ultimately benefit not only during those storm events, but the other 90% of the year where that basin is not in use for its intended purpose. And the other aspect is extracting additional value from that public engagement. And so I'll touch on that briefly with some of our projects where you know, the public is involved very early on in these projects, typically earlier than we normally have. And there are some challenges associated with that. So moving on to the West Washington Street project in particular, this was the first project for the Copper Slough that occurred after that Battle of the Basins. And you can kind of see, you know, how we changed our direction once we altered the scale of our project, but also, you know, our expectations of the final deliverable. So here, this is just a brief overview of the West Washington watershed. It's 408 acre. I said before, it's 36-inch drain tile. If you zoom in, you're not going to find a single detention pond in this area. And just for reference, if you're familiar, this is the Kraft manufacturing facility. I'll use that for reference in future slides as well. So that just gives you kind of a perspective. Interstate 57 is just off to the west here, and 74 is to the north. So the project area, like I said, there's no detention ponds. So what's shown here in this pinkish purple is essentially what's providing stormwater detention. There's no way for it to flow over Mattis Avenue and out to the Copper Slough. It's all trapped. It all has to be drained by that 36-inch pipe. And so there's a lot of challenges facing this fully developed but older neighborhood on the west side of Champaign. These are some of the pictures. And what you can kind of see is most of the flooding is actually contained in the city right-of-way along the roadway, but there was several homes that were impacted by flooding. And so you can kind of see that with a lot of these pictures. And this was happening, this wasn't just a one-off. This was happening on a yearly basis and sometimes more frequently than a year. And so this was becoming problematic. And in a lot of ways, this is one of the top priorities of the city of Champaign, which is why it was selected as the first project that the city moved forward with. So some of the goals we were looking at, the problem areas, but ultimately, you know, the city was looking at implementing something closer to what the Second Street Basin provided, but also wasn't interested in spending, you know, $15 million of 2007 dollars on a big pipe and just pushing flow somewhere else. And so they're looking at something they could implement in a phased approach. But at the same time, the city had started to form what was called steering committees. And what these were organized resident groups, and they were popping up all throughout the city. If you had a problem area that was severe enough, typically a steering committee was being formed. And there were several of these formed throughout the city at this time. And so we met with those on a regular, that committee on a regular basis to get a lot of initial feedback. We met with council members, city staff, and then even we had residential public meetings that took place. I will say the steering committee, some of the pros are you get that local perspective that you don't necessarily see. I mean, yes, I lived in Champaign, Urbana for close to 20 years, but before this project, it's not like I was familiar with this neighborhood and what they had to offer. And so you got that personal touch to the project or early on. The challenges were, though, bringing him on in the conceptual level of the project. There was a certain expectation that, okay, I'm meeting with the city and the engineer this year, start construction. Maybe next year I'll have my problem solved in year 2 or 3, and that's just not the case. There's definitely a process that has to take place in order to construct these types of projects, and so setting those expectations to be more realistic was one of the challenges that you had when you bring in the residents in that early of the process. So the study findings for the West Washington found that we needed about 40 acre-feet of storage, and obviously if we're able to locate that stormwater retention closer to the problem area, we're able to more efficiently store that data, that runoff. We don't have to convey it as far, and so there are benefits to that. So what we have shown here in green and the surrounding area was the phase 1 preservation pond area, which shown in blue, and the piping that connects the 2 pond areas is was phase 3 or phase 2 of the project, and then the upstream collection system was phase 3. And so I'll just kind of step through each of those briefly to kind of show what we ended up with, that you can kind of see is vastly different than a 72-inch pipe in a big regional detention pond. So for the preservation pond, here we had an area of kind of tucked into the existing neighborhood, very close to the ground zero area of the problem. We were able to place 11 acre-feet of stormwater retention at this location and do some minor reconstruction of the surrounding area. And that cost was run right around $2 million plus land acquisition, and built and completed in 2015. So some of the challenges with this project, we had that aesthetic versus volume, and this was really the first kind of question we had to have answered, just because, as you saw with those pictures, there was a lot of flooding that was occurring, but they weren't interested in having another Healy Street Basin in their backyards or in their neighborhood. While the Healy Street Basin, was kind of tucked away and isn't very visible, it's not something that you want in your backyard. And so, so that was something we had to consider. The land acquisition, the land use in this plot of land was different than the surrounding areas, and so, and it being where water was naturally collecting, it kind of made sense that this was the area that had to be the first point of impact for this project. And then, some other challenges were to make sure it works with future phases, set the expectations. Second Street Basin was close to Campus Town, right between Campus Town and downtown Champaign. So it is a highly visible area. This was not as visible. So, we need to make sure that, we're achieving that look and feel of Second Street Basin, but being mindful of what the surrounding neighborhood could really take. And so, here are some pictures of the project after construction. So you can kind of see we had, a nice park-like feel to it. On my next slide here, I've got a nice visual of this is post-construction, soon after. We're still establishing vegetation at this point, but you can kind of see that we've got this nice short trail. We have a lot of the homes backing up to this. We have rain gardens that were placed right along the roadways to kind of filter any runoff coming directly from the pavement adjacent to this site. But then the next slide, you'll see this is fully established, and in all honesty, it seems to have just kind of integrated itself into that neighborhood, and you wouldn't even know at this point that it wasn't part of the existing neighborhood from the start. And so that was ultimately the goal, is trying to just seamlessly integrate it, provide some park-like amenities, but keep it more on the smaller scale that would fit more into this the constraints of the site, as well as the overall neighborhood. So looking in phase 2 of the project, the Glen Park project, for this one, as with every project, you have your unique site constraints and things like that. So we were able to achieve 17 acre-feet of stormwater retention. And this is a nice overview of the site. So we have existing residential to the south and the east of this project area. We have an existing park that existed here. And what we had was an existing industrial site to the north. And what this industrial site was doing is there was a row of homes that were sandwiched between the park and this industrial site that they were buying up to kind of provide a buffer between their facility and the surrounding neighborhood. And so when the city was ready to move forward with this project, there was only 1 or 2 homes that was left along this 2-block stretch of this project area. And so, the city worked with the industrial facility to kind of, maintain their buffer, because that's what they're ultimately interested in. But then we were able to rework their access to their facility. Previously, they had gone and driven through the park and out to University Avenue to the south. And so the problem is that they had previously been routing their truck traffic to the south, sometimes going along the park, but oftentimes going through the neighborhood. And so reestablishing that entrance to the site we were able to kind of maintain that buffer, kind of rework the whole area, and implement some stormwater retention in underutilized area. And so that project cost about $7 million and was complete in 2018. Again, some of the challenges, we were again battling with aesthetic versus volume, and I'll touch on that on the next slide. Stakeholder coordination, bringing in that industrial facility into the discussion was unique to this project area. But at the same time, we were still having meetings with the steering committee and the local residents and the park district to make sure that we were all on board with what was ultimately going to be taking place, and really ultimately just kind of continuing that evolution of the project. So here's a kind of an overview of that, the main cell of our Glen Park Pond, and I guess the main feature one of the main features is this large retaining wall on the north side of the pond. If you can imagine, if we kept this 4-to-1, 5-to-1 slope that we established on the south side, if we continue that on the north side, we would probably lose at least a third of our surface area of our detention basin. And so, not to mention all the volume that goes along with it. And so this is one of the areas where the city determined, okay, we need to maximize the volume. And so the trade-off was to install this large retaining wall. And this goes the full depth. So the water below the surface goes another 10 to 12 feet down. So you can imagine that this wall is 25, 30 feet tall. And so it was a massive wall, but provided some aesthetic benefits as well as some technical outcome benefits. Features like this waterfall kind of mirror that Second Street Basin feel. This obviously is a more accessible stormwater detention basin. And so to go in along those lines, we needed to integrate a few more benefits that the Second Street Basin had into this basin. And so you can kind of see with some of these other pictures that we had, we've got some lighting, some walkways, some railings for the overlook, some trails. There's a little bit of a picture of the entrance that is separate from the park in some ways. Right here we've got to the north of that just some stormwater retention for the industrial facilities parking lot, and so we were able to kind of integrate that all into the open space that had been established by the buffer that was trying to be established with the industrial facility. And so some of the look, normally when I'm designing a detention basin, I'm not thinking about what it'll look like at night. But a site like this that's going to be a little more accessible, a little more visible from the park and the surrounding areas, lighting became something that was critical. And so the down lighting that we did for the along the wall kind of just added that accent that you normally don't think about, and gives it a completely different look at night that the residents were, and the city's thrilled with. And then, just some lighting on the gazebo and other features just for safety reasons, but realizing that a site like this could very well have people either before sun up or after sundown for a little bit of time that that lighting becomes critical for. So things like lighting are just normally not in your thought process when you're designing stormwater management facilities, but that Battle of the Basins kind of changed the game for Champaign, and things like that are now have to be brought to the table early on in the design. For phase 3, there's not a lot of great pictures, so I only have the single slide. It's just some pipe in the ground. You build the stormwater retention, you got to get the runoff there. So we reached a little bit further upstream to kind of convey that flow into those ponds. And so those projects were completed in 2020 at a cost of roughly $12 million. For the Garden Hills neighborhood, we have the project area, and this has a little bit unique of a evolution in itself. But again, for reference, you have the craft facility here. So the West Washington was just to the south of that, if you remember. There's some commercial area along Prospect Avenue. So if you just draw a line between that commercial area and the craft, that kind of defines what the Garden Hills neighborhood is. You have Interstate 74 right off to the edge here, and Interstate 57 is kind of the back. And so some of the big problem areas there that I have a few pictures at are the elementary school that's on the north side of this neighborhood. You'll see some flooding pictures associated with that. But this area has some unique features in itself. So looking at what the Garden Hills project evolution took place. So here on the left, we have some excerpts from the Copper Slough Watershed Master Plan. And there's actually a separate study that was done just for the school itself. And the whole Garden Hills area was quite challenging. The Copper Slough Watershed Master Plan, I would probably say, didn't have a great solution. The solution that was presented was doing some grading along the Copper Slough to lower the invert of the waterway in order to be able to better outlet that neighborhood with a larger diameter pipe. And then there really wasn't a lot of opportunity for stormwater detention. And so it was quite challenging to try and get something. Around the time that the West Washington projects were being constructed, another firm took under the study for the Hedge Road or the Garden Hills project area. And they had this concept of buying up a row of homes just south of the railroad. And I'll have an aerial view of that project area, and basically install a linear stormwater retention channel like conveyance and detention system, and use that as the main backbone of your stormwater project. And there was some challenges with that approach. You can kind of see here, like I had mentioned, some of the problem area pictures that we had, and these were dating back a number of years. But this is a brand new renovated elementary school that was essentially inaccessible from the north because of flooding quite frequently. And so that was a problem. We were having, the same discussions with aesthetic versus, the technical outcome. The Bulletin 75 rainfall was a big challenge, just because the Copper Slough Watershed Master Plan and even that local study was done under the old rainfall data. And then we came in to do the detailed design, and we were using Bulletin 75 rainfall, and just finding that the recommendations in that previous study were just no longer going to work in the same way. And so that was one of the big hard stop moments early on in the design. Railroad coordination, maintaining expectations. You can imagine, the West Washington project had been implemented for a number of years, at least the first phase, and then Glen Park was definitely more visible, a little more recently. But you had more and more neighborhoods saying to the city, okay, I see what you did in West Washington. When are you going to come to my neighborhood and do the same thing? And so there was a certain level of expectation that goes along with those developments that you had to kind of satisfy. And so looking at the Garden Hills project area, you can kind of see here where we have the railroad tracks, we had the existing hedge road, and we have this big long corridor that we're going to put this kind of meandering conveyance and detention channel. And so when we found that the Bulletin 75 was kind of changing things, we had to change how we were going to use this site. The other thing to note was that the school that's just off to the left here, just to the north, serves both sides of the railroad tracks, and the primary crossing is along Garden Hills. This is not a dedicated crossing, and so we needed to not only manage stormwater, we also had to figure out how we were managing the pedestrian and resident access to the site. And so when I kind of go through the first phase of this project, I'll kind of touch on that in the next slide. So what we ended up with was more of a, less of a conveyance and channel type feature and more of a two-cell detention basin, just because of the fall across the site, which is, close to 10 feet. We have two separate cells. The existing water surface is the same at both, but the high water level will be managed differently for each cell. We have a central park that will include a railroad crossing path. The railroad crossing path was not included in this first phase. It will be included in the next phase that's currently under design. The construction that's occurring now is just this first what's shown here, as well as a little bit of the collection system to the south. But some of the unique features here, we have pedestrian bridges. So this is several thousand feet from east to west, and the city was concerned that if you have people walking around this site, that they don't want to get them trapped between the ponds and the railroad tracks. So we have two crossings, one at each of the cells. We have features at each of the intersections. We have a park-like setting that I can show some of the early concepts on the next slide. And then, we talked about things like waterfalls and other features, but just based on the site constraints, it was going to be challenging to get those fit in. But the thing we do have, and you'll see in this next concept art, is we have another retaining wall. This one was more challenging because it was kind of sandwiched right up against the railroad right of way. So it changed our design a little bit. But again, we had the same kind of issues where if we went with the same 4-to-1, 5-to-1 side slopes, we were going to eat up at least half of our surface, and we were going to have just a meandering channel. That's all we'd be able to achieve. And so putting that wall in gave us a significant amount of volume. We were able to get close to 50 acre-feet of storage in these two basins. Kind of see here, the central park is going to become a nice gathering place. We'll be able to kind of focus residents into this area. And like I said, we'll have a gated resident or a pedestrian crossing of the railroad right associated with this park. And so it'll be able to bring the residents to this designated and safer crossing for the elementary school school children.
Hey, Chris, we're
Yes.
at time. Do you have like a couple more slides, or how much time do you have?
I only have one more slide.
Okay, perfect.
So the next steps are to continue that 20 to 30-year cycle, continue those stormwater amenities, utilize that stormwater utility fee to kind of build out this kind of approach to other neighborhoods, continue with the Garden Hills neighborhood, and just, target some of those other neighborhoods throughout the Copper Slough that are kind of next on the list for stormwater infrastructure. So with that, if there's time for any questions.
All right, well, thank you so much. We're going to stay on time. So there are a couple questions in the Q&A. Chris, if you would mind answering those just by texting them in there. And maybe if there's time at the end, if you want to stick around, we can ask some questions live at that point. Sure. But thank you so much for sharing that. And last but not least, we're going to talk about adaptive planting and management, the Gray Willows Wetland Mitigation Project. I work for the Conservation Foundation, so I'm very excited to see pretty pictures of plants. So I am excited to welcome Tom Slowinski. He's the technical director of Wetlands and Ecology for V3 Companies, and a certified professional wetland scientist with over 45 years of wetland ecological restoration and environmental impact assessment experience. So he's going to share with us his data-based approach to adaptive management, and we're excited to hear. Thanks so much. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you. I'm assuming you can see my slides.
Yes, looks great.
So thank you. As Amy mentioned, I'm work for V3 companies. I'm in their natural resources group that deals with wetland consulting and water resources issues, floodplain, stormwater management. George Milner, who I work with on this project, is the brains behind the organization on mitigation banking. He's in our large ecological restoration group. I manage our wetland mitigation program, and George is key to the design and making it all work. The Gray Willows Wetland Mitigation Bank is on property owned by Campton Township in Kane County. It's on the Gray Willows farm that's about 208 acres. It has a very interesting history. It was owned by Ace and Lillian Fessenden. Ace invented the cardboard milk carton. And Lillian was a 1950s actress that brought out celebrities to the farm for the summer. They did not want it developed. It's a very interesting, unique property, which I'll show you in a few minutes. It was purchased by Campton Township in 2010 as part of their open space program. V3 and Campton formed a public-private partnership in 2003. Campton's goal was to get free or low-cost ecological restoration of their properties, and also to get some additional revenue from the mitigation bank sales. This is our second bank with Campton. V3 has a design, build, manage, finance approach to mitigation banking. Kind of builds on our experience with wetland mitigation, design, and construction. We designed and permitted this bank in 2015, 2017. I had a major role in that. The mitigation banking instrument, which is the document that tells you how to operate a bank, was approved by the Corps and the interagency review team in 2017. We started construction in 2018, have a 5-year management and monitoring period required by the agencies. And the most important thing in mitigation banking is to meet the performance standards within the 5-year period. Not only from an economic standpoint, but mitigation credits are, the supply is dwindling in the Chicago metropolitan area. So that's very important to get credits released, not only for developers, but transportation agencies and public agencies that need credits. Some of the existing conditions, focusing on the middle slide. This is the 208-acre boundary. Fearson Creek is along the southern boundary. The estate home was here. I'm going to focus on 3 areas here. This was one of our mitigation areas. You'll see it was a turf field when we got involved. The middle area was a depressional farm field with a small farmed wetland. And maybe the most interesting area was this existing wetland in the north that drained by these very unique ravines and this woodland. We enhanced this wetland to get mitigation credit. And we're working with Campton Township. They're restoring areas outside of our mitigation bank, including this very nice oak woodland. So this is our mitigation banking instrument, a summary of the type of credits we got. These are our 3 mitigation areas. Area 2 to the south was along Fearson Creek. We also restored the banks of Fearson Creek, although I don't have many pictures of that. They had pretty eroding banks and spots dominated by reed canary grass. Area 7, the central area, was kind of just a depressional ag field. And then we did some creation to the north, but we're mainly focusing on area 11 there. So implementation summary. We started pre-seeding weed control and construction in 2018. I'll go over some of those details. We did dormant seeding in the fall of 2018 and 2019. We installed a lot of emergent sedge meadow wet prairie plant plugs in 2019. We had very good hydrology due to a nice wet spring in 2019, which resulted in our first credit release. Interim veg standards, we met those in 2020, the second year. And based on our adaptive management and adaptive planting, we met all wetland creation reestablishment areas in year 3. And it was important to maintain those in the 4th and 5th year, which we did, and met all final performance standards last year. These are mostly vegetative performance standards, which are set by the regulatory agencies, mainly the Corps of Engineers. Although there are other benefits from mitigation banking from both a water quality and a stormwater management perspective. We need to have less than 5% non-native species cover in each plant community, which is the hardest one to meet. We need 18 native perennial species at a 10% frequency or greater. And George, if you have questions about this, I'll have to pass them on to George. There's 2 floristic quality standards. This is a more common method in the Chicago area. Floristic quality index of 20 or greater. Those are very easy to meet. And a native mean C value. This is a value given to each plant in the system to contribute to the quality index. And none of the 3 most dominant plant species per wetland plant community may be non-native or weedy. And we determine this through both qualitative and quantitative transect sampling. I'm going to skip that because a lot of people know about that in the Chicago area. And I gave this presentation, a previous version, at the National Mitigation Banking Conference in Jacksonville, Florida last year. This was a little unique to some of those folks. So keys to success: preceding weed control, adaptive modified planting plan based on as-built grading and hydrology. And one of the benefits of a design build manages approach that it gives us the flexibility to change what we're doing from both an economic and resource perspective, including modified plant mixes based on post-planting weed and invasive species management. And that was a factor in the north part of the project. So why we do preceding weed control? We do it 1 or 2 full growing seasons prior to native seed installation and plant. It achieves effective control of the most persistent and aggressive weeds, especially when you're dealing with reed canary grass, cattails, or Phragmites. It reduces competition and prepares a clean slate for native species to grow and expand. It reduces the long-term use of herbicides due to quicker native species establishment. It minimizes native species side kill resulting from less herbicide use. And it accelerates native species establishment. So project goals and performance standards can be achieved earlier. And I have photos showing how this works in the 3 areas. So this is the southern area along Fearston Creek. This was the turf field in 2017, which was proposed as a wetland creation area. Prior to construction, 2 herbicide preceding weed control applications were conducted during 2018 to kill the existing Kentucky bluegrass and other lawn weeds. This was our engineering grading plan for the project. We did find 1 drain tile in this field, and we installed a level spreader along the north edge of the property as kind of an insurance policy to help establish hydrology. It was fed from Fearston Creek with a valve that we could control if we need to. In the end, we didn't really need that. So this is the level spreader installation in the upper right. once the turf grass was killed, our construction guys, and these guys are really good. They said, well, why don't we scrape this off? Because we have a place to put it. Because this area 6, I'm not going to talk about that a lot, but that was kind of an old farm pond. We filled that in with some of that material to create an emergent wetland. So this is some of the planting in 2019. It was a sedge meadow wet prairie seed mix that was installed. And then we used various types of wetland plant plugs throughout the area, kind of based on the existing grading and conditions. These are some of our summer interns, although now we call them seasonal field technicians, and we are hiring for 2024. More on that later. So this was June 2019, 1 month after planting. You can see some of the wet conditions also in this middle photo. And by August 2019, we had a pretty decent plant community developing. These are current conditions from 2023, resulting in a very high quality, diverse, emergent sedge meadow wet prairie plant community. And there is different wet areas throughout this area. So this is kind of a before and after summary of our data. Our native florist quality index was 44. This was in 2021. That's considered a very high quality native plant community with a native mean seen of 4.13. The standard is a 3.5, and this is a very well exceeded the performance standards. Onto our middle area, area 7. The photo on the left is from our 2015 wetland delineation. It was a cornfield then. We had one farmed wetland in the center, and this was our proposed wetland creation area. Here again is our engineering grading plan. We did some perimeter grading around that to squeeze out a few more credits, which is an important consideration to pay for your all the work you need to do. One thing I didn't mention, the nice oak woods was on the southern perimeter of the area. You can kind of see it here on the left. This is our overflow point, which was just to control and kind of set a normal water level in the area. As part of the initial design. This is just a photo of a broken drain tile. So this is kind of after grading and tile removal. It actually, in 2019, was a little wetter than we thought, which is not a bad thing, actually. Which led to our adaptive planting plan, because in the approved MBI, we proposed 2 plug mixes. That's how we thought the hydrology conditions would support, in addition to a 100-foot buffer prairie planting. But we figured out what George figured out we needed to do. Based on the hydrology, we needed to refine our planting plan based on as-built hydrologic conditions, kind of a micro planting effort. So basically, George kind of waded through this whole thing, flagged out different plant communities, and on the right is our adaptive planting plan, where we went from 2 plant mixes to 5, including wet prairie, sedge meadow, shallow emergent, deep emergent, and aquatic. We purchased most of our emergent plants from Spence Nursery in Muncie, Indiana. And they are very flexible because we needed to change our plant mixes in a short order. This is just kind of a schematic of the planting. This is kind of your standard water level plant community mix elevations. So starting with Mesic Prairie on the slope, wet prairie plugs kind of on the edge, saturated soils, sedge meadow plug mix where it's shallow depth water, 0 to 1 inch depth, shallow emergent sedge meadows, 1 to 3 inch depth, shallow emergent plugs, 3 to 6 inches, and then deep mergic and aquatics. So these are some photos shortly after planting. You can see some of the planting zones delineated with different color flags. And then 2 weeks after planting in July of 2019, in September 19, we had good plant establishment with maintained good hydrology. And then in July 2020, 1 year after planting, you can see it's kind of a very nice hemi-marsh condition with a very diverse plant community. And here's some sequential photographs, 2018, 2019, and 2023 in our 5th year. This isn't the best photo because it doesn't really show some of the diversity, but it's if you look on an aerial, it's a very nice aquatic emergent sedge meadow plant community. And this is a much better photo. So it went from 2015 to 2021. This is one of the areas. V3 is responsible for a 100-foot prairie buffer around the perimeter. Campton is also doing prairie on the remaining parts of the farm field. I think that was including a part of a grant from the Conservation Foundation. And we work with them on the management of the entire property. We coordinate with burns. We coordinate with weed control. We help them when they have technical questions on restoration. One of the issues in the upland buffers that we had that they're dealing with is it was infested with chervil, which is very bad weed, but we've gotten through the management of all our areas quite successfully. This is just some of the data. I won't go into this very much, but absolute non-native species cover is very low. Native perennial dominance is very high. And the number of native perennial species with 10% or more frequency, you see we met that standard. I don't see the FQI here, but that was also pretty high. And then on to area 11. So this one was a challenge. It was basically a monoculture of reed canary grass, but we needed to figure out how to meet the wetland enhancement performance standards. And we've had some success dealing with reed canary grass in the past on a much smaller scale. But it's a very aggressive non-native perennial species, and it's a prolific seed producer and spreads through extensive rhizome production. So we did pre-seeding weed control with this too, pre-planting weed control, 2 boom spraying events in 2018, and another one in spring 2019, 2 weeks prior to planting. And killing the reed canary grass via herbicide was necessary in order for the restoration to work. There was actually a small patch of lake sedge in the middle of this. Hard to explain, but we definitely preserved that. And then plug installation began in mid-May of 2019. And an important factor, due to the likely resurgence of reed canary grass from the seed bank, grass species were omitted from the seed and plugs mixes so we could use a grass-specific herbicide to continually manage the reed canary grass. So the seed and plug mixes were composed entirely of sedges and forbs. And after 1 month, we started to get good plant growth and some good hydrology. So some of the data on area 11. So the FQI pre-management, and one thing the we were required to do as part of the mitigation banking review and approval. We collected good floristic quality data in the existing wetlands so we could monitor what the agencies call lift or increase in function due to the restoration, and US EPA was kind of the impetus behind that. But you can see we had our native FQI of 2, 5 native species, relative native cover of 5.4%. And after 6 years of management, the native FQI was 36.5, 85 perennial species with a relative cover of 98%. With the dominant plants, I don't know what these are other than the carex, Joe Pyeweed, and forget that one. So anyway, here's our cover for all our areas, some of our FQA data. You can see the native FQI here. The standard is 20, and we far exceeded that in all of our wetland creation reestablishment areas. We exceeded the native mean C of 3.5 in all. We had extensive numbers of native plants. And some of the harder standards to meet, the absolute cover of non-native species, all below 5%. And the native perennial relative importance values were all over 90. So it was a very successful project. On the right is our overall adaptive management plan. We had to do that for some of the buffer areas also based on their conditions. But here's some of the summary of why we're so successful. The design, build, manage approach is key because we control everything during design, construction, implementation, and management. It requires great communication between the designers and our construction guys. And our construction group has lots of experience with not only stream restoration, but wetland restoration. Preceding weed control was key. Adaptive planting plan following grading and tile disablement. Modified seed and plant mixes based on anticipated weed pressure. A well-planned installation process, which we, with a large, busy ecological restoration group, managing all the projects and the field crews is very important, especially during your small windows for plant installation. And then delineating plant zones, not only during the post-construction design, but during plant installation. Results in good establishment success for both seeds and plugs, effective ongoing invasive species management. So summary on the right is our as-built, not only wetland delineation, but mitigation plan. This was approved as part of our final credit release. We did have a couple buffer areas that did not meet standards, but it wasn't worth the effort to continue with those. So we did a final 2023 growing season wetland delineation. We had a timely 5th year growing season monitoring. Ongoing weed control is key, and our field ecologists and summer technicians spent 2,500 hours in 2023. And the reason is that for the hard to meet standards, you don't want any surprises showing up during your final monitoring. We scheduled the IRT sign-off meeting, and the IRT is the Corps, US EPA, US Fish and Wildlife Service. They conferred our delineation, or verified our delineation, and we provided them data they could review prior to the sign-off meeting. And they really like this site, as do we. It's been a very successful mitigation project. And after our sign-off meeting, they confirmed that the final credits would be released. So November 1st, the IRT and the Corps released our final 18.86 credits, which is very important in the marketplace for mitigation, people that need mitigation bank credits. We actually had a half credit more than our initial design. And we submitted our final monitoring report just for the record in December. And one of the requirements of the mitigation banking process is having a long-term manager, which in this case is Campton Township, the owner of the property. They're actually hiring V3 to do the long-term management because we know the site quite well, and it's a cost-effective way to do it. And we're negotiating with the Illinois Department of Transportation. They're trying to buy all of our remaining credits, which is not good for the market, but hopefully there'll be other credits available. Last but not least, this is kind of our team. Myself as the project manager, responsible for permitting and agency coordination. George as the site manager. He has assistance from Craig Mack, who is the assistant site manager. He now works at Fermilab doing the same thing. And Joe Smirt, he was the operations guy scheduling our field crews so we could all have the correct resources. So that's my presentation. I'll just mention V3 has recently entered into a partnership agreement with the Will County Forest Preserve for a mitigation bank in Will County at the Thorn Creek Headwaters Preserve, which actually is in the Lake Michigan Calumet watershed, which has no mitigation credits. And that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Tom. I think we have a question in the Q&A, and if anyone has any additional questions, not only for Tom, but for any of our other presenters at this point, please add them in there. Thank you.
Tom turned off his camera, he went away. So Tom, there was a question that isn't there a park next to the site, or even just in general, are there any impacts from any of your neighbors on that site in terms of long-term management or other considerations that you're taking into account?
No, there isn't a park next to this. There's a park next to the Blackberry Creek Mitigation Bank that Campton also is managing it. So we're finished with that. The only offsite concern, it's not a concern, it's actually a benefit. The upstream watershed of Fearson Creek is behind a large impoundment. So we don't get a lot of flooding, and there's some water quality control behind that in that impoundment. But we have no real offsite impacts. The one wetland on the north does extend offsite, which is not being managed. So we have a 100-foot buffer between our wetland and that wetland as part of the approval process. But this Gray Willis Farm is open to the public. Campton has a number of trails around the perimeter of that central area, and actually the old barn is open for events. It's a very nice facility.
Well, thank you so much. And without any further questions, we can go ahead and end a little bit early. I want to thank all of our presenters. I want to thank our sponsors, DuPage County Stormwater Management and Christopher Burke Engineering, for making this possible. We really appreciate you all spending your time. Everyone will get an email from me with the professional development unit credit. And also in the chat is a link to a survey. We'd love to know what you think, and that will also be in the email. So thank you so much, and we look forward to doing this again in 2 years. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.